Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 22nd, 2013 special meeting of the Sammamish City Council. My name is Tom O'Dell. I have the honor and privilege of being your mayor, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's attending tonight, either in person or watching from home. I'm going to ask the city clerk to call the roll at this point.
Mayor Tom O'Dell.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Romero Valderrama.
Present.
Councilmember John Curley.
Here.
Councilmember Don Jarrett.
Here.
Councilmember John James.
Here.
Councilmember Tom Vance.
Here.
Councilmember Nancy Rickman. Here.
Okay, thank you. Everyone's here. I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Valderrama to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and join me in saying our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Oh, okay. At this point, may I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. By our vote of 7-0, the agenda is approved.
Mr. Mayor, I was going to make a point to pull out a couple items for the consent agenda.
Okay. Why don't we wait, John, until we get down to there and I'll let you do it then?
Okay.
Okay. We, at this point, would normally have student liaison reports. I don't see student liaison present at the moment. If they do come in later, we'll come back to them. Okay? So, is the individual from Eastlake here? Not yet?
I don't see it.
Okay. So, let's keep on going through the presentations and proclamations and start with the discussion of the transportation level of service. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the topic that we've been trying to present to council last couple of council meetings, so I'm glad that we're going to be able to make this tonight. We have our city engineer, Jeff Bruns, here to give you a staff report. Jeff?
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just a moment while I get this
Thank you,
fired
Jeff, and thank you for your patience.
up. Oh, not a problem.
Oh, okay.
Not the right one. I said the right one. It says transition level of service.
But it's not the right one?
No.
Oh. Open this and see. Oh. All right. Can you get it?
Go get it, you mean?
That's not the one.
Sorry, we've got a little technical difficulty here.
Keeps wanting to do the impact piece. Maybe it's just the first.
If it's all right, we'll switch the order with level of service and 244th because the file I need's not loaded on this computer. And Laura will do her presentation, and then I'll also have a wait of about 2 or 3 minutes while I get that file.
Okay, the chair is fine with that.
Apologize, it appears that a file got saved over the top of it.
So we're going first to 244th, right?
Yes, we're going out of order, and we'll be taking the discussion of the 244th Avenue Southeast non-motorized design options.
And we do have a presentation on this, obviously.
The head of the transportation level of service.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is one of our budgeted projects in 2013. Ask us to do design assessments for the 244th Avenue. This is the section is between Southeast 32nd and 24th Avenue in front of the Beaver Lake area. So our Public Works Department work on this, and we have our Public Works Director, Laura Philpott, to give you a detailed report. Laura?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As been introduced, we're here to talk about the 244th Avenue Southeast non-motorized improvements. I just want to pause here on the cover page for a moment. This is what 244th looks like today. It's a good example of limited shoulder. It's a two-lane facility and without any non-motorized facilities. Has been mentioned, the limits of this project are from Southeast 24th Street to Southeast 32nd Street. I want to highlight that to the east of this section of roadway is the Beaver Lake Park. To the south is Klahani neighborhood, Klahani Park, and the Beaver Lake Middle School and Challenger Elementary School are also in walking distance from this area. Brief project history. The city has a non-motorized program. We meet with the council annually to review the priorities. This is a list where all non-motorized projects, we get a lot of the project requests from the school district, from residents, from neighborhoods, and we've collected them all in one location, and we meet with the city council to review the priorities. The last time we reviewed this program with the city council was July 10th, 2012. And this was, we were reaffirmed that this was a priority. Also want to highlight the Beaver Lake Park Master Plan. When that extensive public involvement process, meeting with all of the neighbors, took place, there was a high level of support for non-motorized facilities in this area. The 2012, or the 2011-2012 budget adoption process included appropriating $150,000 towards the beginning conception of this project. And then the 2013-2017 Transportation Improvement Program, when it was adopted, also included this project, as well as the 2013 budget that was adopted. Before you on the screen right now is a cross-section of the proposed improvements. Just want to highlight some of the elements that we're proposing to include in this project.
Laura,
Yes.
maybe using this diagram, you could explain what's in place today, and then we
Sure.
can talk about what's changing.
Sure. Use the mouse here. So today, there is, see the dashed line underneath here, there is existing pavement. It is essentially 2 lanes in width. There's very little shoulder, if any. I've actually used this as a non-motorized pedestrian, and there is not a lot of room. The areas where there is some shoulder, it's often, there's some storm drainage issues, and so the pedestrians are often forced to walk around to get into the lane of travel. If you frequent this often, you'll know that there are a number of cyclists that use this route and a number of pedestrians. So what we're proposing is to include as part of the scope is the addition of a bike lane on the east side, separated with a landscape strip, which would also double as an area to handle the stormwater treatment, as well as a sidewalk for the pedestrians. And then on the west side, we're proposing that the project also, the roadway be widened enough to accommodate a bike lane on that side as well. So the final cross-section would look very similar to Southeast 20th Street, having the bike lane on one side without sidewalk, and on the other side, sidewalk with a bike lane. We are proposing that the sidewalk be placed on the east side that is adjacent to the park, and so that is where it is, you'll have the majority of users is gaining access to the park and coming down, and also it would be the, that's the side, the Beaver Lake Middle School is also to the east of this area. I want to highlight here too that, we look at every project and we talk about what's the context-sensitive design. It's kind of a buzzword. But what should we design here that fits with the neighborhood? What should we, what elements are important? Well, we look at, is a gravel trail or a gravel pathway appropriate? I think we've heard from the council that we should evaluate that. And looking at this particular location, in order to get the width needed for the safety, we're going to need to build some retaining walls. And that, I think, is where a lot of the cost comes into place, as well as the treatment of the stormwater. Now, those two costs do not go away with a gravel path. They would still be incurred. And then we would have the ongoing maintenance long-term. Also, a gravel path is probably would not accommodate the cyclists, so we believe that the bike lanes are still a very important element in this project. The high number of users that we anticipate also, we believe, warrant the actual concrete sidewalk in this location that is matches up with our standards. So I just wanted to share the budget. The total project costs are listed in the first column, and then in the second column, second, third, and fourth column, we've broken this down by the funding sources, just to show that based on the cross-section that was shown in the previous slide, that the project does fit within the adopted 2013 budget. And this will end up with bike lanes on both sides, the sidewalk, and then a final overlay, and all of the necessary stormwater treatment components. I do want to highlight that we do have some challenges on this project. What project wouldn't be fun if we didn't have some challenges to overcome? The Williams Interstate Pipeline is adjacent to the right-of-way, just to the east. It's not, they have an easement along the park frontage as well as along the private property, people's property, and they are anticipating doing some upgrades to their pipe in the future. So they're very interested in what we're doing, and they're also very interested in us not working outside of the right-of-way, encroaching in the easement. This is, we're saying this is a challenge because the next item you see is on-street parking. If you've been out there on a game day, people are very creative in finding places to park, including the ditches and wherever else, sometimes making the road hard to navigate, not only for non-motorized users, but for motorized users as well. So we are looking at how can this project accommodate on-street parking adjacent to the park. And because of that, there may be some encroachment or some some coordination we'll need to do with the pipeline so that they feel comfortable with the improvements that we're proposing. Just wanted to also let you know that we recognize that whenever we do frontage improvements or private properties who are adjacent to the property, they have their own landscaping, existing trees, and so we work very closely with the property owners, and we plan to, as the design is finalized as well, to make sure that their needs are met and their concerns are addressed. I want to highlight that we've heard from some of the residents that there's some concerns with Southeast 32nd Street intersection, potential crosswalk concerns, and we will be looking at that in more detail as we get into the final design, as well as handling the existing drainage concerns. As I mentioned, a lot of the shoulders do get flooded during rainy season. The last challenge I want to highlight, and I want to pause on it for a moment because this actually could have some cost implications for the project. There is a culvert near the entrance to the park that goes underneath the roadway. It's the Laughing Jacobs Creek culvert, and while we're working to see if we can leave that intact and not have that be impacted, it is possible that we may be required to replace that as part of this project, because as you know, once you touch something to widen the roadway at all, if we need to extend the culvert, it will necessitate us actually replacing it. And I just wanted to highlight what those impacts would be to the budget. it would be a total project overrun of close to $80,000 if that permitting requirement came into effect. Again, we're not asking for the council to appropriate those funds at this time, but we do want to highlight that that is a possibility that we could be back again in the future during project award or another time, looking for additional funds.
Obviously, we will try to minimize the cost of the project, and hopefully we don't have to do this, but if we do, that's why you allocated the contingency funds in the transportation department to deal with this kind of unexpecteds. But we're hoping that we don't have to widen this culvert there.
Laura, how big is that culvert?
52 inches.
52 inches? Mm-hmm. Okay. Councilmember Jared, you had a question?
Well, I was going to ask that question, and obviously it's adequate for the drainage from Beaver Lake Park if it's 52 inches.
We don't believe that there's a capacity issue. We just believe that there may be a permit requirement to bring it up to current standards.
Thank you.
Next steps, we would continue this winter and early into spring, the design, finalize the design, work with the adjacent property owners to address their concerns, and then hopefully be back to City Council to award a construction contract in July, early July, and beginning construction late July, early August. So our recommendation is that we continue to move forward, and we're hoping that if there's concerns or changes in the scope that the council desires, that we hear those now before we move into final design. But we'd like to include bike lanes on both sides of the roadway. And that's all I have.
That it?
That's it.
Okay.
City Manager.
City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you go back to the roadway section, Laura? I heard somewhere that the bike lanes have multiple benefits. That's only one of them is the benefits to bikers, like providing a sight distance for the driveways, for people getting in and out of their driveways. That helps them. Postal vehicles to pull through it, and so that the delivery of the mails. Utility pickups. Tell us, not only it benefits obviously the bikers, but it provides additional safety, and this is one of those critical roads that you were looking at it.
Thanks, Ben. You are correct. I believe there's 17, and while I won't try to recite all 17 of them, there are a number of benefits, and as Ben stated, that one of the biggest ones is it does provide the drivers that additional sight distance and room to negotiate into the roadway when you have cross streets. But another large one is it does provide that additional buffer for pedestrian users, where they, it's uncomfortable to walk right adjacent to the traveling vehicles, and so it provides that. It does provide the safe space for postal service, deliveries, emergency breakdowns. There's a number of issues, and like I said, I'm not going to try to recite all 17, but I'd be happy to provide that later.
Thank you.
Laura, sorry, Nancy.
Go ahead.
Well, I've got several questions, so, okay.
If there are all these benefits to bike lanes, what about extending them down 228, which is our major arterial, for the safety reasons that you've decided?
Sure, we'll take a look at it. If there's a council consensus, we'll come back in the budget time to tell you the budgetary implications of that.
Sure. Councilmember Curley?
What is 1.7 million? What do you get? Is that about $1 million a mile? Is that what it is normally?
Yeah, that's been pretty consistent with.
Is that for,
I mean, I'm just wondering, what's the distance on this?
What's the total distance?
2,700.
2,700 feet.
Half a mile.
Okay.
In miles for just a second.
880.
Storm drainage is a big one.
What's that?
Storm drainage cost is a big one.
Yeah.
Laura, can you elaborate on the issues involving the pipeline a little bit, please?
With the pipeline?
Yeah.
Well, let me go back. So adjacent to the public right-of-way, is it 25 feet? Yes. There's a 25-foot easement that runs parallel to 244th Avenue Southeast. There is a a large pipeline in there that the Williams pipeline is planning to upgrade. We've received some notices from them requesting access on certain properties to do some survey work. Other than that, we're doing some digging and some research, trying to find out what their actual schedule of work is and what their plans are. We do have some meetings scheduled with them specifically associated with this project, and we're hoping that will also allow us to get some more detailed information about what their plans are. As far as their actual construction schedule and what they're doing, we're not very sure at this particular moment.
Is there any water department activity planned for this quarter?
No, we actually coordinate our capital projects with the Water and Sewer District. Actually, our city engineer, Jeff, meets with them on a monthly basis, and they have not highlighted this as an area of concern.
Going back to the cross-section diagram of the roadway, yes, that one. I take it we're looking from south to north here, seeing as the sidewalk is on the right side?
Yes.
Okay, and we're widening the road, but the whole project looks like about a maybe 20-foot widening of the whole thing? Where we are today?
Including the sidewalk? Yeah, probably close to 20 feet.
Okay. I note the retaining walls shown on the right side of the diagram here, and I understand why they're there. Do you have a feel for how much of that would be required?
I'm going to ask Jed Ireland, our project manager, to step up here. He's been doing more of the analysis and detail, and see if he can answer that question for us.
Yeah, we have, right now in the budget, we have about $50,000 worth of retaining walls. And retaining walls they've been about $25 a square foot. And so we probably have at least a couple hundred feet of retaining wall.
Okay. If we put in, is that with or without the parking assumption here?
We wouldn't use, where the parking is, we wouldn't be using walls. We'd be looking where the grade is pretty even. This would be probably towards the south end, adjacent private property.
How much parking would we get?
I think that we're shooting for about 400 feet, which is a little bit more than parking that is out there.
And how many cars?
20.
20, okay. If we were to shift the center of the roadway to the left as shown on this diagram, could we get out of building some of the retaining wall?
Well, we would on the east side, but on the west side, we would have a cut situation. Those walls tend to be more expensive. Drainage would be impacted, and then also the existing driveway access. So typically, we like to build the walls in the fill location.
Okay. Laura, to your point on safety issues, I note that the parking is inside of the bike lane next to the swale area there, which is where it logically should go, but discussion I've heard in the past is bikers really don't like that because of door openings and that type of thing.
So this was schematically shown as parallel parking, and what we are trying for, and that's one of the reasons why we need to coordinate with the Williams Pipeline as well as the Parks Department, is we're trying to work in where we can get angle parking. Angle parking actually back-in angle parking takes away that concern of the parked car doors, and also if the vehicle's back in, when they pull out, they have clear vision of the vehicles as well as the bicyclists.
Okay, that would solve that issue. I agree. Okay, how many trees are you going to take out?
As few as possible.
Good answer, Laura, good answer.
How many?
And we don't know at this time.
Okay. Other questions from council? Councilmember Whitten?
I have a question. Does this meet road standards, and in particular in regard to medians?
In particular regard to medians? It does, because of the classification of this roadway. This would not require medians on this classification.
Thank you.
Okay, can we?
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And we're proceeding, next step is the full design and try to get the project ready for construction. What is our timeline? Are you looking for this coming summer for
Yeah,
construction?
we hope to be back early July for council approval on the construction contract.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jet. Are we ready for the level of service? I think the council member, James, we're considering taking the items 2 and 3 that is related to this presentation, that perhaps your questions might be answered, Councilmember James, and so feel free to ask the staff questions. If that happens, then we don't have to take the items off the agenda.
So let's go through the presentation, see if that
Right.
does it.
And I think that was a good suggestion on your part, Mayor, to get through this presentation before we get to the consent calendar. Thank you.
Okay, let's try that again. Apologize for that snafu, I guess the file got overwritten. Okay, so Mayor and council members, Jeff Barnes, city engineer, and we are here finally to talk about transportation level service once again. Just a brief outline of the talk tonight, background and recap, that's where I'm going to spend most of my time. Last time we dealt with this topic extensively was back in 2005 and 2006, where we spent 2 years coming up with our current policies and ordinance. So most of the time will be spent on that. And then the current project list, what we completed so far, some of our assumptions, the alternatives that we've developed, and then conclude with our recommendation and schedule. So first I want to frame the discussion. Our objective here tonight and what we've been tasked with is to modify, the council's objective to modify our concurrency project list. There are other elements, as I'll get into, in the the circle of concurrency and level of service and impact fees. As of now, we've not been tasked with revisiting the methodology, just to keep that in mind, where to keep the discussions framed, but I'm happy to answer questions or go into that as you desire. So previous discussions recently, we came to council in February of last year at a study session and just kind of did a Transportation 101, since most of the council now are new since the last time we dealt with this subject in 2006. And then we had a joint planning commission and council session in May, and then just related, we adopted our current TIP, our Transportation Improvement Program, on June of this last year. So how we measure level of service in Sammamish, we do it, we measure our segments, which is a volume of capacity in terms of just, we have our defined policies of what a given roadway section can carry, and it's a policy. It's not in terms of like a pipe, how much water can a pipe fill, that's a scientific defined thing. A roadway, how much vehicles it can carry, it's a policy-based objective. And then we measure our traffic model, how much volume is on that road based on our capacity, and that gives us a ratio of how full the roadway is. And then on intersections, we measure it, very common with other jurisdictions, is just purely delay and measurement in terms of seconds, and that's roundabouts, stop signs, and traffic signals. So what we do, let me just back up a little bit on that last slide. So what we do is when we get development coming in, we add that to our traffic model, and then add those trips that let's say a 100-lot subdivision. We'll add those 100 lots into a traffic model, and then perform another run on the model, and it'll tell us if we have adequate volume on our facility, either volume on our segments or adequate delay on our intersections. That's what we refer to as a concurrency test. So I mentioned earlier is that we have an integrated system, in that you can't adjust one without affecting the others. And it starts off up in the corner here with our policies. And that's derived in our comprehensive plan and our level of service. And I'll go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. And then our concurrency analysis, which I just alluded to in our concurrency tests. That provides us with our project list. And then based on our policies of how that is funded, then we come up with our impact fee rates. So first off, our policies and our level of service. Back in the early days of the city, we had the PAB, the Planning Advisory Board, which was a multi-year process and multi-review process with extensive public meetings. And they they concluded with our current policies, and down below there, these are some of the things that they considered: the average daily traffic, where I talked about the segments, the volume to capacity ratio, and then for intersections, the number of seconds of delay. And that all concluded with the adoption of the PAB and the comprehensive plan on September 16th, 2003. So the way we perform our analysis, we take the assumption of our build-out of all the land use, taking into account that the current zoning and also the current sensitive areas. And then we assume, add on to that our current funded 6-year TIP, or project on our 6-year TIP. We take our traffic model, and that's regularly updated with traffic counts. We last did that in 2012. And then what we do is when development applications come into the city, we add those trips to the traffic model and run the test to determine if we have adequate capacity to be able to substantiate or support those growth trips. So in the project list, there's a master project list that was established when the comprehensive plan was adopted, and that's table VQ, and it's basically like your wish list. If you could do all the improvements you desire without a constraint of funding, what would it be? And then we drive that down to our 6-year kind of rolling window of improvements that we desire on a more narrowly focused and constrained outlook. So this here is example on the bottom of that table VQ in the comprehensive plan, and here's a snapshot of our current 6-year transportation improvement program. So then we get to impact fees. How do all these projects get funded? And it's based on state statute, the Growth Management Act, and the fees are collected 30% at final plat and then 100% at building permit. Recently, there's been an option for applicants to defer as well to the final closing of the home. And the policy, yes?
So that is the statute, but the council had the authority to make an exception to that statute.
Absolutely.
And that is that the collection time, the council passed the ordinance, defer that to the sale of the units rather than the building permit issuance time. And we used that, actually, we extended that the the developers for 2 years prior to December, and then I think we extended again another 2 years. So and Sammamish is the only city in the state of Washington is doing that. I want the council and the record to know that.
For us.
Correct.
Thank you, Ben.
And then the last line there, growth pays for growth, which has been the mandate that was taken on when we last looked at the policies. And a 97% share, that is it's important to point out that that's of the eligible costs. And the methodology that we went through back in 2006, just under half of a project cost is what I would call as an eligible cost, which is a cost that can be attributed to growth. So 97% of the eligible costs translates to 48.6% of the actual cost. So for every dollar of new project costs needed for growth, or our concurrency projects, 48.6 cents are paid for by growth, which is 97% of the total eligible cost.
Jeff, this may be a good point for clarification for some of the new council members who have not been involved in this process. The statute is very clear that you cannot charge the new development to pay for existing deficiencies. And some cases that when you build one full lane, that's going to provide or address not only existing deficiencies, but also provide additional capacity for the future. So we can't obviously build a half a lane or quarter lane, so it's got to be full lane. But then you go through the accounting of that to identify what is the cost of that one lane is attributed to the existing deficiencies, and what is it that the new development is going to benefit from it. And from that, I think what Jeff is driving to, in our analysis, about a half of the projects we're going to be addressing the existing deficiencies or is going to provide service for current citizens, but the other cost, the other half, will be the additional capacity for the future needs of future developments. So when you take the 50% multiplied by, and we can't charge the half also, 100% of that half. so that we reduced that another 3%. It's a 97% of that 0.5%. When you multiply those two, is about 48% of the total project cost, what is being collected via impact fees.
Thank you.
That's exactly it. Thanks for that clarification, Ben, or explanation. So what have we accomplished so far, and what's kind of the current project list? These are, the projects listed up there are all ones that have been funded by impact fees and are on our current project list. Starting with 228th, and then most recently, the signal at Duthie Hill Road and Issaquah Beaver Lake intersection. I mentioned earlier that we take traffic counts on a regular basis and update the model, and our model is very accurate in terms of what the results are compared to what the tube counters on the road are actually recording. So it's a good validation process that we go through. And then why are we here? There's the desire to change the project list a bit, and that's, as we go through and priorities change and desires or improvements. So one of the things that's changed since 2006, we now have an adopted town center plan. And the improvements called out in that plan are not included on our concurrency project list. And then the projects that are up on the screen there are the remaining projects that are on our concurrency list that have not been completed or initiated yet. And in particular, there's the future phases of East Lake Swimmers Parkway to the north, and then Issaquah Pond Lake Road, and then some other projects that are pretty far out, but they're still included in our impact fee calculation. Intersection improvements down at Southeast 24th, and then improvements to the north up on Sahalee Way Northeast. And all these reasons, all these projects or desires are reasons that we need to assess the system that we have today. And again, I'll remember back to that slide where we've got the circle, and changing any one element requires subsequent changes to the other elements. So our assumptions are to maintain the current methodology for calculating capacity, and then also our current methodology for calculating street impact fees. And just in terms of the magnitude of effort, what we're going through and looking at changing the level of service, I would say that's kind of like a Pine Lake type of activity, and delving into either one of these, especially the methodology for calculating the fees, would be kind of like a Lake Superior. The last time we did it took 2 years to get through that process.
Jeff, can you talk to us a little bit on the bypass strips? I know prior to 2006 ordinance adoption by the council, we were using the King County impact fees, and then there were different zones within the city.
Right.
And since we adopted our own impact fee, we also changed how we calculate the bypass strips. Thus, those projects, particularly in the town center area, would benefit that from significantly compared to what we used to have. Can you expand on that a little bit for
Correct. And
council's benefit?
I'll jump forward here to a...
In the process of doing so, Jeff, if you could define for the council and the audience what exactly you mean by a bypass strip.
Certainly. I will skip forward to a... You know what, it's... So bypass trip, and forgive me, I don't have the technical definition in front of me, but it's essentially where it's a trip that's already on the road and you perform another function. So the perfect example is you're driving to work and you stop off at the ATM on your way to work to get some cash for lunch. So the trip that's on the road would be your trip to work. And then the bypass trip would be a trip that you're already on the road and you happen to stop off at the bank. So if you're calculating in the traffic model, that trip to the ATM would not be counted as an original trip because that car is you're already on the road going to work, as opposed to, let's say, a trip where you're going to the store to get some milk. That could be a linked bypass trip where you're stopping off on the way home from work to get the milk, or you could be home and realize, oh, I need to go get some milk, and then that would be an original trip. So
How do you account for it if you hit more than one place on your trip to the store?
well, that could be, depending on, you can make multiple trips, and that's what they talk about, it's most efficient is to combine your trips. So let's say you're going to the store and you get some milk, but you also stop off and get pizza and get a movie. One of those would be the trip that gets counted, and the other two would then be bypass trips.
What about the daycare center and then maybe the dry cleaners, so in the morning you drop the shirts and the kids? Make
Exactly.
sure that you drop the right pieces, the right places, and...
Right, and those would also be bypass trips. And then to further muddy the waters, there's this thing called a link diverted trip, where let's say you live in Klahanie and you go to work in Redmond. Well, actually, maybe let's say you work in Microsoft in Redmond, so you're going up north through the city, but you're going to first then head over to pick up a coworker. That's not a coworker. Let's say you're going to stop off at a store that's not along your way. So you're going to turn. Let's say you would go down Lewis Thompson and go up the Parkway to work normally. But this time you're going to drop off your shirt at the dry cleaner, so you're going to go up 228th and drop off the dry cleaner there, and then go down Inglewood Hill Road. So that would be a link diverted trip, meaning that you're already on the road, but you're going out of your normal way of travel to perform that additional stop.
Thank you.
So this graphic up here shows that in our model, actually this one's trip length factor. The next one is trip generation, or trip generation is another way. New trip factor, you could flip that around to say bypass factor. So the way our methodology is calculated in that are the residential trips, trips that for residents of Sammamish, and most all those trips are then going to and from work. Each one of those trips is counted 1-to-1. But then in terms of, at the other end of the spectrum, gas station trips, it's less than 20% of those trips are counted. So 8 out of every 10 cars that are in the gas station are not being counted towards the trips or the impact fees for that gas station. It'd be just 2 out of 10. And this is to reflect the fact that most of those trips, increasingly as you get toward the smaller bars on the right of that chart, are trips that are already on the road. And it makes sense when you think about, like, the second highest is public schools. Well, most of those trips, you're not already on the road going somewhere else and just happen to stop off at school. Your destination is the school. You may then stop off at the library, you may stop off at McDonald's, and that's why those new trip factor or bypass factors are higher for those other uses.
Thank you, Jeff.
Just I'll touch this one other, since I had it up in front of you. One other factor that we calculate in our methodology is a trip length factor. And this assumes that, just given a factor of 1 for those same residential trips, the drivers going to and from work, and most of those trips predominantly are on or going off the plateau. So you take that as a baseline trip length. And then for the retail trips within Sammamish, it's a much smaller trip length. So then it's an additional discount, if you would say, to account for that. So for a business or retail type trip, number one, there's a higher bypass factor. So like I mentioned in the gas station case, 2 out of every 10 trips are accounted for and the 8 out of the 10 are not. And then you then further reduce that by a trip length factor. And this one varies more based on the land use, but it's in our methodology.
So Jeff, if there's a gas station on the plateau, if there weren't any gas stations on the plateau, now one came, you would charge them an impact fee for more trip generations, even though every trip that goes to that gas station is shorter than it would have been if it had to go down into Ithaca or Redmond. So shouldn't you actually get credit back instead of being charged an impact fee?
Well, the gas station that they're not going to anymore would not have been charged impact fees at all, because it's outside of the city.
Well, I understand, but he's actually reducing the trip mileage by having a gas station in our city.
I think the traffic model would say that there's not many people that go that's an original trip to leave the plateau to go get gas, that all those trips are linked bypass or diverted trips, that are trips already on the road leaving Sammamish.
Well, I can give you, for example, we moved up here in 1979 and there weren't any grocery stores up here, and I worked out of my house. So when we went to the grocery store, we went down to Issaquah, and then we got the grocery stores up here. So in reality, it was reducing the trips rather than increasing the trips.
We could be happy to look at that, but again, that's kind of out of the context of the discussion we're here to talk about tonight.
I understand.
Are you lobbying for more gas stations?
I would just add that you're using different routes, though. You're going to be driving on a different road. So perhaps 228th wasn't carrying any of the trips to the grocery store because they were all going off the plateau in different directions. And now 228th needs to have capacity for those trips. So just because the trips aren't going further, and as Jeff said, if you're going further, you may be more apt to do more combined trips versus it's closer, maybe now you're willing to run to the store just for milk.
And just to add on to that, and that's why we do have that double discount for the local trips, that most of those trips are already on the road, but there are the trips where before you wouldn't drive down to Issaquah to get the milk, but now that you can just drive a mile down the road and get it, you would. So there is that new impact on the network.
Jeff, I know we recalibrated the model recently. Do we also look at changes in driving habits? I know that when gas started going north of $3 a gallon, I started bundling trips more and more, just because I didn't like dumping $50, $60 at the gas station twice a week. So has that been type of behavioral change been factored in?
Not directly for our methodology. We rely on a national standard called the ITE, or Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, and that's I brought the big 3 volumes of books. I brought those to the last couple meetings.
Your excuse for not bringing it.
Right, thank you. Of course. So that is culminates surveys nationwide, and eventually that would pick up that trend. That volume is updated maybe every couple of years. A new volume is just coming, new edition is, the 9th edition is just coming out shortly. So I would venture to say, and they usually in the beginning of the preamble, they kind of talk about what changes they've observed, but there's also a large volume of surveys, so some changes relatively, they don't want to have a bunch of a bunch of dynamic movement in those trip generation rates. So even if there's a recent change, they may not show up dramatically.
Okay. So we're probably looking at a 3 to 4 year lag in terms of trend change.
Potentially.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so then our assumptions, I mentioned that. So then, what's driving this desire? First thing I mentioned earlier was town center. And there's 2 projects that have been identified as needed to accommodate the town center improvements. First off, and most necessary, is Southeast 4th Street, and then also the portion of Duthie Hill Road. And that seems, why is that related to town center? But it's the model, a lot of especially out in Trossachs, those trips pretty much bypass the city. They're in the city just for a short stretch, and then they're down Issaquah Fall City Road and heading off the plateau, whereas with the town center, they're going to be attracted to stay on the plateau and head into the town center. And also, it generates more trips.
We can discuss this further, but my interest in doing that second one dropped markedly a month or so ago.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. So when we, excuse me, when we get back before you, and even at the Planning Commission discussion, this is one of the roads that I had discussion with our Public Works Director also, that I'm not quite sure that it rises to high priority amongst all the other project needs that we have. So they're going to take a look at this thing a little bit more closer, and then to see what we can come up with.
Certainly.
Thanks. Nancy. Councilmember Whitten.
I have a comment on the street reclassification. Is now the time to do that, or do you have some things you want to say first?
Sure.
You mentioned, or the presentation mentions that reclassification is required to accommodate needed capacity. Isn't reclassification really just shuffling pieces from one spot on a board to another?
No, and I apologize if there's a terminology that gets misinterpreted. The reclassification in this instance, when I mentioned that our comprehensive plan policies dictate or determine what our capacity is, they essentially, based on a classification of road, determines how big the pipe is in terms of the analogy of water. So in our comprehensive plan, Southeast 4th Street is classified as a collector, and so that's a certain size of a pipe is the capacity. And regardless of the amount of, and you can only put so much water through the pipe. And in order to get a bigger pipe, the way our comprehensive plan, it needs to change the classification. So the desire there is that the town center generates, since Southeast 4th Street goes down through the heart of the town center, currently classified as a collector, the town center generates more volume than can be accommodated by the collector classification. So then when you increase it to a minor arterial, it allows a bigger pipe. So then it allows, and again, this is policy-based, so the cars are going to be there regardless.
So is this just a matter of semantics, though, that,
Yes.
I mean, I guess what I'm not happy about is the fact that this road is going to, it sounds to me, by reclassifying it, you avoid making improvements to it that you'd otherwise have to if you left it as a collector.
No, and actually, we'd have to make improvements regardless. It's just that we cannot make enough improvements, even if we build it out. So there's a table in the comprehensive plan, I've got a snapshot of it here, but there's a maximum threshold that can be reached on any given classification. So there's a collector, there's minor arterial, and there's principal arterial. And each one of those three classifications maxes out. So with our classification of Southeast 4th Street currently as a collector, the volume that is generated by the town center exceeds that maximum capacity, policy-based capacity that's in our comprehensive plan. So we need even more capacity. So even by building the same exact roadway, our policies allow a higher volume of vehicles on a minor arterial than a collector.
So on a minor arterial, can you have a crosswalk in the middle of it, away from an intersection?
Well, we wouldn't recommend that on any street, actually, but that level, a crosswalk, a mid-block crosswalk is not part of the calculation for capacity.
Okay, Mr. Uzigi has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that the council members within this question stemming from that there's been some practices by some jurisdictions that by simply changing the classification that you don't need to do the improvements to the road and thus allow the development to occur. That is not what we do here. That is not what the intent here. That just simply is that when you talk about the reclassification, it's just simply the improvements, not necessarily changing the name of the street from A to B. It's that doing the improvements to it.
And I realize I could do a better job of, and what I certainly will do this when we take this to the planning commission is add some graphics here to illustrate the situation that we're faced with, or the challenge that we're faced with, and why we need to do the reclassification. It's kind of a unique circumstance.
Well, when you look at the town center plan, though, you've got a crosswalk away from the signal intersection.
Those are conceptual plans, and regardless, that would not affect the situation that we have here today. It's the fact that staying concurrent with our current policies, we cannot, with the town center, we cannot remain concurrent with Southeast 4th Street as a collector.
Thank you.
The other alternative would be to develop a new classification such as a town center roadway or something like that. But then you run into a further challenge that the classifications also, there's our local classifications which just matter within Sammamish, but then they're also then expand to the federal and the Washington State Department of Transportation. So once you have an inconsistency between your roadway classifications, because the Federal Highway Administration would not have a town center arterial type of classification, and that can just make it a little less clear.
Thank you. I was just going to say that this level of detail is what we're hoping to get into with the Planning Commission, and we're just trying to get some policy direction tonight from the council.
Thank you. What it is that you need from council tonight?
Tonight. All right, so when we came here, our options, in order to change this project list, we implement changes to our level of service policy, or LOS. And that changes to our measurement analysis, and then, these are all the options available to us. And then down there is the circle of all the related elements. And what our options and what we've looked at changing is our level of service policy. And I'll jump to the options that we presented when we came back to you in May last year. And this was to replace them, do nothing, basically, change the project list and then test it again. And that's certainly a viable option. And we did that, and it did not work. Actually, there's another slide on that. Then we can lower the level of service system-wide. We can do a facility-specific level of service, or we could average the system. I'll go into each of those in a little bit more detail. So replace some projects. The benefit of that is there's no policy change, you just change the list.
So, Jeff, before
Yes.
you go into more details, you're here tonight to get a direction from council among those four options.
Correct.
Which one that you want council to have the planning commission to look more in-depth?
Yes.
Is that what we're here tonight?
That is what we're here for,
Okay,
yes, thank you.
That's the clarifying.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, so here's the four options that we considered, and this is what we're looking for your recommendation on one of these four options. And the first one is not really an option that's valid because we tried this since there's no policy change, so we just as staff tried this one and it failed. So just by pulling a project off the list and then retesting did not work. So then the next option is to just lower the level of service wholesalely. So we allow that policy-based pipe to be bigger. And the benefit of that is that it can allow more projects to be phased out or extended over a longer duration. But the cons in Sammamish, it's a very fine line. If you lower the level of service, you could instantly have all your projects go away in terms of impact fee funding. So that you would not have those needs anymore, and then those desired improvements would not be funded by growth. They'd be funded 100% by city. And on each one of these are some other agencies that use some of these options. Some facility-specific, level of service. And this is assigning a unique level of service to a specific facility. And last May, we heard this was your preference. And the benefits are that it's transparent and defensible. It's very clear what you're trying to do. The cons are it can be perceived as inconsistent. And it would require a modification to the, all these would require a modification of the impact fees. Some other cities using this option are Snohomish County and Mount Vernon. And the last option, averaging the level of service, or another term agencies often use is a screen line. And so the way this might look in Sammamish is you average the 3 quarters to the north. You would take the capacity of Sahali Way, East Lake Sammamish Parkway, and 244th Avenue, sum those all up, and then add the volumes on the forecast volumes, and that's where you would analyze those as a whole. And similarly on the south, we could look at 228th and Issaquah Pine Lake Road. The benefit is it's pretty easy to do. It gives you flexibility because then once a project does fail or you have a failure in concurrency, you can then choose which quarter to improve to then bring you up to be concurrent. The cons are it can mask the problems, and then also you can be concurrent, you can be fine for your policies, but 2 of your 3 quarters can be stacked up and 1 of your quarters is fine. So then on the ground you have problems, but your policies are saying you don't have to do anything about it.
Can you tell us a little bit more in real life, for example, under each one of those options? Let me maybe perhaps try to do one for this option, see if that is what you're trying to articulate. Could it be, in our case, that we have 3 arterials going north, Parkway, Sahali, and 244th? In this case, you would be looking at averaging the capacity, adding up the capacity each one of those arterials, and then adding up the demand, and then that's what you do, the volume to capacity ratio.
That's exactly it.
So that will be the kind of typical, not that I'm suggesting we do that, but that's what this particular methodology would allow you to do that.
Correct.
Could you go back the previous 2 to give some real examples? What would that be for council's benefit?
Ben, before he does that, your thinking on this is that if you average the 3, that in reality, traffic will reflow to the capacity available.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly, Mr. Mayor. So in this case, then you wouldn't need to do the improvements on the Parkway, but you would need to do Sahali and perhaps the 244.
Okay.
Right. So, thank you, Ben. So going back to option B, lowering the system level service system-wide. So in that case, you would effectively take your policy-based pipe and just all of a sudden make it bigger. So then the demand volume most likely is going to stay the same. It's just that where your threshold of having to make an improvement would then just drop. So it's, for instance, where you say, I'm going to replace my roof every 20 years, and all of a sudden you change your mind and say, I'm going to replace it every 40 years. So your roof is still going to be in the same situation, still going to receive the same weathering. It's just you're going to change when you want to improve that roof.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. And then C, facility specific, would be you keep the system as it is today, except in the specific example here, you take the projects you do not want to improve, for example, East Lake Smash Parkway, and you give them a facility-specific level service. You basically make their policy-based pipe bigger. And there's various ways to justify that. East Lake Smash Parkway in particular, because it's expensive corridor to improve based on the topography. You could say, all projects that are within 100 feet of a sensitive area lake, or all projects that have, certain defined topography. So there's lots of ways to specifically identify, or just say East Lake Smash Parkway has a different level of service.
We in fact use this approach currently in our system. We have one intersection, 228 and Inglewood Hill intersection.
Right.
In that particular instance, that it is very difficult and challenging to widen. You got a gas station at the one corner, established business in another corner, another two corners, and furthermore, widening the road would make almost impossible or very challenging for pedestrians to cross that roadway.
Exactly.
So the council intentionally made a policy choice in the past to say that we will accept lower level of service at this location, but we would also look for alternatives to minimize the impact at this location, i.e. secondary access to East Lake High School. That help us to do that.
Correct.
So this is an approach that we're currently utilizing.
Yes.
Is that
yes,
accurate?
That's correct. We did that for intersection level service back in 2006 when we last were working with the methodology. And because in order to make those intersections concurrent for level of service at the intersection, we would have had to build more lanes. And for instance, the specific example was Issaquah Pine Lake Road and 228th Avenue Southeast. The 20-year forecast, the forecast model showed that we would need to make improvements to that intersection, and that was not desired by making that lane the intersection even wider, which then has a negative impact on pedestrians crossing the road because it's a longer crossing. So then our policy changed to say that in those specific instances, that we would go from level of service D to a level of service E.
Great, thank you.
And then back to our averaging, I think we already covered that one. So where do we go from here? Our policies and objectives, what's the desired outcome, and there's a detailed process. We first starts with the Planning Commission, and then we have to then amend the comprehensive plan. We come up with a new project list, and then the new project list determines our new impact fee rates. And our recommendations, based on what staff heard from the last time we were before council in May, was to look at option C, which was a facility-specific level of service. And then the other options listed up there is to add the projects related to the town center and to address the needed capacity improvements on Southeast 4th Street.
Question for staff in general. Are all these options necessarily mutually exclusive?
Not necessarily. They drive on one particular outcome. They're related to it. There are different ways of getting there. That's what those options are. The philosophical understanding of the pros and cons in each one of them. For example, the do-and-do screen analysis or the corridor averaging analysis, if you happen to be, for example, living on 244th and you're already having a difficulty getting in and out of driveway in your PM peak hours, that probably is not going to go well with that citizen. That you're saying that, well, I average the three corridors, 244th, Sahali, and Parkway for the north access points. So that's the kind of nuances that, Mr. Mayor, that we need to have the Planning Commission to take a look at this very carefully. So I use that as an example. Every one of them I could probably use an example, but for the sake of time, I just wanted to give you that one example.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Whitten?
Yes, I have serious concern about our existing use of segment averaging, especially as it involves the town center proposed development and 228th. I think it creates unrealistic consequences or results. And I would like to have that looked at as part of this review by the Planning Commission.
And what is the specific request, Councilmember?
Well, I'd like to eliminate it. Personally, I've seen how it distorts the results that we consider, and I don't think the new council members are familiar with it, and I guess I would ask staff to explain what segment averaging is, and then see if the council would, as part of this discussion. I mean, it's an important element, and I don't think it's been explained, and the consequences are explained in terms of the numbers and things.
I understand what you want, so we got it.
So the segment averaging, back in, again, 2006, when we were last looking at our, the whole methodology, one of the situations that we were faced with was that, I'll use East Lake Sammamish Parkway as our example, the whole corridor was failing concurrency back in 2000, well, actually, at the time, the comprehensive plan, so 2003, but at the time, we were facing that situation of looking at our level of service and our concurrency and our impact fees, 2005, all three concurrency segments were in failure. So in order to become concurrent, we would have had to improve all three of those, and that's a monumental task, not only just in staffing, but, particularly the funding. So we came up with a incremental corridors or segment averaging approach, and Victor, if you jump in if you have a better explanation of this, Victor's idea, but is to then, we have a 6-year TIP, and we kind of came up with the idea of an 18-year TIP, where we would, and we allowed in our policy that we could, as long as the average of the corridor remained concurrent, then we were okay. Even though if you looked at an individual segment, it was in failure, but so long as the average was concurrent, then we were okay. So how this worked on East Lake Sammamish Parkway is that once we completed the improvements to Phase 1, then you average out the remaining two segments that are in failure, then you're okay. If we eliminate the average corridors, then we would have had to, with our current policies, we would have had to improve all three segments of East Lake Sammamish Parkway within our 6-year TIP. And that was the main corridor that drove that policy.
And I would just ask, Mayor, Council, we really need direction to the Planning Commission. So the segment level service, as Jeff just explained, is a great summary of it. That adds a level of effort to the Planning Commission workload and calendar, which is fine. We just need to have clear direction. When we go to the Planning Commission, we'd like to have clear direction for them so they know what they're tasked with.
I think that my Public Works Director is telling me diplomatically that I charge her to bring this back before the council by the end of the year with a very narrow scope of work. Now, what she's telling me that if we want to expand the scope, that's fine, we can do that. But expanding the scope means that time, additional resources, and that means it's pretty much, we're not going to be able to get it done in the 13. Is that what you were telling me?
I'm very concerned if we expand it, we won't get done. And what I understood, it was a priority from the council to have this work done in 2013.
Council, or Deputy Mayor Valderrama?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with what Jeff just said a second ago, and we've been illustrating East Lake Sammamish Parkway, and that's specifically what the Planning Commission will be told on option C, facility-specific level of services looking at East Lake Sammamish Parkway. And so we can look at getting that off the tip once and for all.
So you prefer the option C, so we need to get the council concurrence. If that is in fact what council wants to do, that's a surgical process. We can do that thing within the scope of the work.
Good.
Okay.
I'm kind of hearing Councilmember Jarrett.
Thank you. I would agree with option C, the specific level of service, and also I would suggest that we don't task them with looking at segment averaging.
Other comments from the council?
I have a question, because I thought if we don't, so you're saying leave segment averaging in?
No. Well, yeah. Don't task them with reviewing it.
For the time, leave it as an option.
Yeah, because I think,
It won't affect the East Lake Sammamish Parkway, though.
But it will affect 228.
228.
because if you don't leave it in, we could be facing a fairly big bill on some of these streets by having to do it all at once.
No, I meant to leave it in.
Yes.
Don't address it as a work.
Councilmember Whitten.
I don't see it as an urgent thing, because we're not building the town center right now. But I do see it as a very significant concern that council members should make a conscious choice about when they understand it. Now, you used East Lake Sammamish, and I agree, the purpose of this whole exercise is that we want East Lake Sammamish Parkway off the list. And we have to go through this extensive process because of the interrelated codes and things. However, segment averaging, for example, on 228th, averages the segment between Issaquah Pine Lake Road intersection south with the intersection from that point up to, what is it, 20th, I think?
Segments are,
And
I believe
it
it's-
really distorts the experience of people living on these average segments. And the town center is predicted to generate, I think, 50,000 cars a day. And averaging permits gridlock in parts of those, both north and south. And I think it needs to be looked at sooner than later as we do our revisioning on the town center plan.
Other comments? Well, I like option C the best. I do have a fair amount of sympathy for Nancy's position on segment averaging, though, particularly as applied to the street that she just mentioned, because frankly, having looked at it, the segments maybe are a little bit too long in certain places, and you get the averaging that hides some choke points, and there are a couple of them there that do come out as either failing or almost failing, depending on how you look at it. And if you have a part of a flow system that's sub-optimized, it will affect the entire flow system. So while I like the idea of option C, I'm still looking over my shoulder at segment averaging for this one particular corridor.
if I could, a couple of points to make out, make. One thing, all of this is concentrated in the PM peak hours, so anything that's observed in the morning is effectively unrelated. Two, what you observe on the ground in terms of congestion is related but not directly appreciable to the policies here. And then if we were to, for example, uncoupling segment averaging, we could be forced to have to do a very expensive widening on 220th Avenue.
So what I heard, just for clarification, so we can give clear direction to the planning commission, is that the council's asking us to move forward with option C.
That's correct.
Facility-specific level of service.
That's correct.
To modify the parkway, to remove it from the project list. Review the associated policies to make sure that we don't have any conflicting policies in our comp plan, and then revise the project list accordingly. I'm hearing that segment averaging is something we should keep as a future work plan item and not lose sight of the fact that it is a concern, and that
That's good.
it will be done by the end of 2013.
Town center plan projects to be included in it also, because we haven't really included, so it's time to include that.
So, am I hearing that correct? Do I have
Yes.
7 head nods? Okay.
If there are any bottlenecks, can we address them through prioritization?
We always have the ability to, well, the council authorized us to do a new intelligent transportation system in 2013, so I think you guys are going to see some great improvements on
Okay.
228th next year.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Laura.
So, Mr. City Manager, a question for you. We have this big project list that was part of the budget. When do we get a crack at changing some things?
Revised.
Mr. Mayor, that's the 6-year TIP, what you have. But I think they're looking at the 18-year, the long-term TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan. I think by June, you're going to probably still get the same list what we had, because we won't complete this work by June. It will be towards the end of 13 that we will finalize the work, then that it would have an effect on the 2014 6-year transportation plan.
Where if there are some issues that need to be addressed sooner or later, we will have the ability to do that at that time.
Absolutely. As part of the budget process, budget adjustments, we can do that in the 2014.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay,
Do we have the individual swim state champions?
Melanie, has our guest appeared? Okay. We'll save that for another day then. So this is an opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council. We have a 3-minute limit per person, or 5 minutes if you are representing the official position of a recognized community organization. And I see Melanie running for the sign-up list. Thank you. Melanie, could you come here for a second, please? We have a number of people signed up tonight. Normally, I take them in order of sign-up, and I guess I will do that still. I want to apologize to the people who have been waiting. I know there's a certain group here that wants to make a short presentation to the council, and I'm going to ask your indulgence while we follow normal procedure here. So I will call people in order they signed up. I will, when I get to the end of the list, as per usual procedure, I will ask are there any others who wish to address the council on anything. I'm also going to suggest, in the interest of time, that if you're here to talk about specific agenda items that are on the list, that you may want to save your comments for when we bring that up, but it's your choice. So the first person I have is Mr. Cliff Breedlove, and I assume that's you standing there?
Yes, it is.
So would you please begin by giving us your full name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Cliff Breedlove. First, good evening. I'm Cliff Breedlove. I live at 3203 220th Avenue Southeast. I've got a map up on the screen. My house is right about here where the cursor is located. Some good news for you. I think about 6 or 7 of the names on the list after mine are, I'm speaking for them as well.
Okay.
They're not here, so I'm speaking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm here is to talk about the barricade on 32nd Street that was removed about a year and a half ago. It used to be located about here where the cursor is. And the neighbors that live around this, myself included, I'm in the Pine Lake Heights. It's an older neighborhood west of the barricade where it used to be, and some of the other neighbors who live in the Windrose division on this side here, and as well as more neighbors down here, we're all a little concerned about some of the safety issues that have arisen as a result of removing the barricade. So we met with Deputy Mayor Valderrama Aramayo between 5 and 6 this evening to discuss this. There were about 15 or 20 of us there. And some of the primary safety issues that we have really revolve around the speed at which people are now driving along 220th Avenue here and 32nd Street here. So with the removal of the barricade, our street and 32nd have become basically an arterial for everyone that lives back here, a shortcut to get up to QFC and Pine Lake Middle School and other destinations. While I would have personally rather have the barricade been left there, I understand progress and the barricade was removed, and that's fine. The only thing, we really do want to have the safety issues addressed, because we have a lot of children that continue to play here, and also this street, 32nd, is a major street to Pine Lake Middle School, and a lot of kids walk along that street in the morning and afternoon. Now, the speed limit along these roads is 25, but unfortunately, a lot of people are driving through there at about 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, and it's gotten to the point where this past week, the reason it came to a head this last week, there was an accident recently, right about here. A pickup was coming through there at high speed. Someone was backing out of their driveway, and the pickup hit the car. And then the pickup went left, went through a tree, and into the fence of the retention pond over here. This is the second accident that's happened in the past year. There was another accident right here at 32nd and 224th. Am I out of time? Yeah. Is it 5 minutes already? So anyway, let me just real quick say that what we need some speed bumps in here. We need a couple of speed bumps on 220th to enforce the speed. We've tried the passive thing where the radar's up there to tell people they're going fast. Frankly, the people that are going to speed are going to ignore that and continue to speed through there. We need some physical deterrents to force people to slow down through there. We need a speed bump about here between 33rd and 32nd. We need another one between 33rd and 33rd Place and 33rd Street on 220th to keep this speeding down. Then this turn right in front of our house, it's an L turn. People are taking this thing way too fast. They're often turning on the inside lane. It's just a matter of time. I don't want this to happen, but I fear it's a matter of time before there's a head-on collision there because it's a blind turn. We need some stop signs there. And then we need some speed bumps on the section of 32nd from 220th up to 224th. Another reason I'm here is because after the barricade was removed, a lot of improvements were made on the east side of 32nd, those mini roundabouts and such. Nothing was done on the west side, nothing at all. A sidewalk was put in here and a stripe was put in the road, but other than that, nothing was done to slow people down. And so I'm just here to implore that some very simple measures be taken. Put in five speed bumps or so, 2 stop signs. This is very low cost, and you would really make this a much, much safer street, and the neighborhood would, just be that much better for it. I think that I covered everything. I wasn't planning on making this presentation, so apologies if I'm rambling.
Well, you've done very well, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, one comment or observation?
Well, can I say something first? Thank you. I know you had a meeting with with Deputy Mayor Valderrama this afternoon, and I believe Mike Sauerwein was in there as well from the city staff.
Right.
And we've been aware of this issue as a result of a number of emails received from you recently. You collectively recently, not yourself.
Right.
I want to advise you that while we've had to push it around, this is still on the agenda for the Public Safety Committee, which will be meeting Friday. And at that point, we'll have a fuller audience. I'm going to ask the city manager if he could have staff take another look at some of the issues that were raised or suggestions that were made during this meeting this afternoon. I recognize your problem. Unfortunately, this kind of problem exists all over the city. You're not unique in that regard, so.
Except we are unique in that the barricade was removed.
You used to have a barricade, now you don't.
We're unique in that regard. And frankly, it's a neighborhood street. It's not a major arterial that is designed for 40 miles an hour. And that's the speed at which people are traveling now. Whereas before at the barricade, it was just the people that lived there going 25 miles an hour. So we're unique in that regard. And we're the only barricade that's been removed in the city since the...
To date.
State.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Valderrama.
I just wanted to share with the council something that the people at the meeting had shared with myself and with the assistant city manager, Mike Sauerwein, which was a bit unique to this, is that since the barricade had come out, unanimously across the group, all the mothers and the fathers there cited, and it had been reported earlier in our local press, that the characteristic and safety issues have now made it such that none of the kids can no longer ride their bicycles, and the parents don't allow their kids now out on the streets, near the streets, to play anymore.
Probably safer.
Well,
Since the barricade is taken down.
That's correct.
Prior to that, they were playing in the street with the barricade.
Or they're riding their bicycles still up and down the street.
Yeah, because there's a barricade there, right?
Right, it used to be just like being on a dead-end street.
Right,
and-
understand.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Can I make a comment?
Councilmember James?
When I first joined the council, there was a request by a citizen to have traffic calming measures on a street, and I took it upon myself to drive down that street, and I came away with the same conclusions that you did, a couple speed bumps. I live in Sahalee. If you're over 25 to 29 miles, you're airborne, so it's pretty effective in keeping people, and stop signs. But I was pointed out that, simple wisdom sometimes isn't available to us in government because there's a manual of street safety things that apparently we have to follow. So I appreciate you bringing those to us, but maybe there's some things, and it might not be speed bumps, it might not be stop signs, it might be something that we would call a traffic calming measure, whatever that might be, that staff could come back to us after the public safety meeting on Friday, and I want to acknowledge that it might not be what you're envisioning, but maybe there's something we can do. Unfortunately, it'll probably cost a lot more than a couple $100.
That's why stop sign, speed bump, very low cost.
Yeah, I know that. That was my first inclination, too.
I'd put them out there myself if you give me the
You bet.
material.
Okay.
Dig the hole and pour
Well,
the cement.
let's save the discussion on the options for the public safety meeting, but I believe Councilmember Curley wanted to make a
It's
comment.
just a quick question to Ben. There is some system in place for the speed bumps. It's not haphazard, once one road gets, another one doesn't. There's a specific sort of requirements that need to be met in order to have the thing go in place.
That's correct, and it's the council drafted that criteria that we actually spent a lot of time on it, that we need to survey the particular boundaries of that neighborhood, need to check with the public safety, both police and fire department. I mean, these are effective tools, and unfortunately, they're also very effective in slowing down the emergency response time, too. So, and as Councilmember James said, there may be other options that we take a look at it. The other priorities that they, as the Mayor Odell mentioned, that I have a list right now. It's, what is the total number of neighborhoods that we're currently working on? Or the requests that we have, roughly?
I didn't count them, maybe there's 3 that are very active with us right now, and there's another probably 10.
And the queue is waiting for us to get going on that one. So it's, as Mayor said, it's unfortunately, it's the problem that we constantly deal, and we've been dealing with it.
Okay.
And the city manager did raise another issue that, as a board member for East Side Fire, I have to go back to, and that is emergency response. Each one of these speed bumps costs a responding fire engine 7 to 8 seconds on getting to wherever they're going. So that's something to keep in mind as well, and particularly if it's a medical call. That could make a very serious difference in the outcome. But again, we're getting ahead of the public meeting discussion on Friday here, but thank you for coming and sharing your opinions. If there are other people who are in the audience waiting to speak on this issue, I think Mr. Breedlove has done a very good job of covering it for us. If you want to speak, go ahead, but you might just stand up and say, I agree with him if you're still here.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Liz.
I want to say, you mentioned all the other projects that we have pending, but when you have a situation that has been precipitated or exacerbated by deliberate, well-intentioned city action, such as removal of a barricade, it seems to me that that's a very different situation than something where you've had a road in place for a long time and people are trying to solve a neighborhood problem. When you have city action, I think you need to take another look and see the priority in terms of funding and timing
I agree.
to resolve the issues, because I think that's just equity and fairness.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm having trouble reading this next name. The last name looks like Slaughter, S-L-O-G-T-E-R. Okay, if I missed you by not seeing the name, I'll come back to you. And then there's Alexis Post, Jessica Koo, Lori Barnett. Kathy Bart. Elliot Severson.
No, we were on a roll. We were on a roll.
Yeah, he did say there were 6 voted.
Yeah, they left early.
My name's Elliot Severson, 5150 Village Park Drive, Southeast, Bellevue, Washington. I'd like to give the council a quick update on the progress that we've made this past week. I think you received a packet in the mail on Friday. We've come up with a new site plan. It doesn't really change our overall the plan that the roadmap that Charlie's laid out. So I want you to know that this is we're continuing to work to try and improve this proposal, to refine it, and to make it something that the city council can support. And I think we've made great strides in this proposal. Essentially, what we have done is moved the facility totally off of the city property. So it's now totally on our property, which gets rid of the property exchange. It also eliminates having to deal with the city stormwater, which was a timing cost and a regulatory problem, I believe, one of the most complicated facets of the agreement. So what we're now down to is a proposal that takes approximately 34% of my property, and that's it. And what we've done is changed it where we are going to have a facility where you drive into a parking garage that'll be right off of 228th, drive into the garage, the parking will be under the building, the Ace Hardware will be above it, and the building structure itself will be raised off the ground 6 to 8 feet. So now, the only thing that we are impacting is buffer. And in looking at the site and the original studies, city property is completely impacted with buffer, my site's completely impacted with buffer, but that's now all we're talking about is buffer mitigation. The benefits of this plan are that we now have a site that's 12,000 or 11,200 square feet, but it's all clean water. It's just rooftop. There's no roadway at all. The parking garage now is entirely contained. There's no contaminants coming off of it. So even though we are in the buffer, we are now have totally clean water. And our whole, on the ground, we're not building on grade. We're going to do a piling structure. So in essence, we still have all the functions that go in the buffer by having soil. So I really think this is a substantial improvement. It's a lot easier because there are just fewer things that we have to deal with. Property exchange agreement's gone. Dealing with the stormwater's gone. So what we're really down to now is the time and the mitigation for the buffers. And I think the other thing that this does for us, it brings back into focus the fact that this property, my property, the city attorney's already agreed, we get a reasonable use exception. This proposal uses 34% of the site. How much less of this site can a proposal use? So if we can have the support to move quickly, we can get an Ace Hardware, which I think everybody would prefer to see in the city. Thank you.
Just to correct something, the city attorney has not weighed in with regard to anyone receiving a reasonable use exception.
Okay. I stand corrected.
Thank you, Bruce. Next, we have Charles Kling.
So, thank you, Charles Kling, Gordon Stevens and Kling in Bellevue, 10900 Northeast 8th Street. We did PowerPoint, that got passed out to you, should have before the meeting, and then we had the letter the other day with a lot of discussion, really give you all lots of background, hopefully you read it over the weekend. I'm going to continue on with the PowerPoint now. So we're really at the time to make this thing work with the timing. We know we got the August deadline for the lease. We got to get Ace in there before that and moved in. So we're really at time crunch time. So we need action items tonight. And we're not asking you to do anything tonight that's irreversible. We're just saying, put the meeting back on for February 5th and direct staff to come back with a proposed zoning text amendment for a small hardware store in the office zone. So that's the first action item. And at the back of a packet that has the PowerPoint is the cheat sheet for the action items that we're asking you to do. So there's action item 1, is just get that going so that we have the possibility of adopting the emergency interim zoning text ordinance. The next thing is a development agreement code. This is what we figured out in working through this, working with the city attorney and the insurance council. Best approach is to adopt a development agreement code. So that's the same thing. Action item 2, ask staff to bring that back on February 5th. What we're trying to do is set up a timing so we could potentially have a project and development agreement back at the city council by February 26th. To do that, we got to get this project moving forward. Now, importantly, on development agreement code, one of the big concerns here, can a development agreement modify, I guess it is, I was a little quick here this afternoon, environmental protection standards, and the answer is yes. That's right in the City of Tacoma Development Agreement Code. Specifically allows changes, modifications to environmental critical areas. Tukwila Code allows modifications to any code. Again, we're just meeting the policy of the Sammamish Code, which is buffers may be reduced when buffer reduction impacts are mitigated and result in equal or greater protection of stream functions. That's related to streams. So we can meet that standard, and so we think that adjustments to the maximum 50% reduction in the buffers is appropriate. Yes, there's going to take some time to demonstrate that and put that together with our environmental consultant, but we need to move forward. So how can we do this in these tight timeframes? We need to make a motion to take action items 1 and 2 and get this moving forward for February 26th possibility. Other things are listed here, but also an idea would be to direct the Council's Economic Development Committee to meet with us to work through the development agreement items. Finally, final considerations. Ultimately, the City Council controls land use and project approvals in the city. You control. A development agreement provides the council maximum discretion to control land use projects when you desire to do so. I mean, you can have complete control. And the bottom line is risk can be minimized. Are there going to be potential risks? Potential risks somebody may appeal. There's always that risk.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kling.
But finally...
Mr. Kling?
Oh.
Thank you.
On my sheet there.
Next, we have Tim Koch.
My name is Tim Koch. I'm the owner of Sammamish Ace Hardware. My address is 490 228th Avenue Northeast, Sammamish, 98074. Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm here tonight just to speak for a moment or two, kind of on behalf of the community, and just to more or less an update. I'm trying to avoid what happened on December 4th and have lots and lots of people show up here again and give, testimony for, a couple hours or whatever on this issue. It is very much a hotbed issue in this community. Your community is very interested in keeping the store, but I think people are starting to get a little antsy, and they're just, I just see it every day. Folks come and talk to me and say, hey, what's going on? Are we moving forward? Is something happening? So, and here again, I believe that there'll be a lot of harm done to this town without Ace Hardware, and that harm is permanent if we can't get something done. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Tim. Next, I have Diane Bugge. Is it Buggy or Buge or?
I won't make you say it. Bugay.
Bugay, okay. Thank you.
Let's get rid of this here.
Now, if you had the accent on the E, I would have been just fine.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Diane Bouguet, address 15865 Southeast 58th Street, Bellevue. I'm a board member of the Issaquah Community Network and the Drug-Free Community Coalition, and I'm here tonight to tell you just a little bit about the Influence the Choice video contest. Peer influence is a powerful force during the teenage years, and our video contest, Influence the Choice, provides a creative way for students to positively influence their peers. We're asking for short video commercials, less than 2 minutes, where students inspire their friends to resist the temptations of alcohol, marijuana, and prescription drug use. The contest is being sponsored by the Drug-Free Community Coalition and the Issaquah Community Network. The Drug-Free Community Coalition is made up of 12 community sectors within the Issaquah School District boundaries, and we're working together to reduce teen alcohol and drug abuse. We have many coalition members from Sammamish, the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce, the Sammamish Youth Board, the Rotary Club of Sammamish, and Skyline High School students. I brought some materials for you tonight, which I'll pass over here, as well as a 1-minute short promotional video that was put together by some Issaquah High School students.
Hi, I'm Emma Watanabe. And I'm Olivia Marcus, and we're broadcast students here at Issaquah High School. And we're here to tell you about this amazing opportunity the Issaquah Community Network is giving to students in the Issaquah School District.
Each year, 2 million people die from alcohol poisoning and prescription pill abuse. To help students become more aware of these issues, middle and high school students in the Issaquah School District are being given the opportunity to make a video persuading their peers to avoid the use of alcohol, marijuana, and prescription drugs. The video should influence others not to use harmful drugs. It can be funny, but only as long as it is in good taste and it is appropriate. Your videos will be judged, and the top videos will earn prizes of $50 to $100. The most influential video will earn an $800 grand prize. These videos can either be done by yourself or with a team. The video can be as short as 30 seconds or up to 2 minutes long. Between now and February 28th, you will upload your video to YouTube and provide the link to the Issaquah Community Network. So if you want to influence your community in a positive way,
And have a passion for filming, or just want to win $800.
dedicate some time during or after break to make a video to influence your peers and the community.
For rules and a full list of instructions, go to www.issaquahcommunitynetwork.com.
And you can have $800 sooner than you think.
Those girls are ready for prime time.
Yeah, aren't they? Yeah. And I'll just add that our first few entries for the contest have actually been from Skyline students. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Barbara DeMichelle.
Hand those out. Thank you. I am Barbara DeMichelle, and my address is 580 Front Street South in Issaquah, Washington, and I'm the Executive Director for the Issaquah Community Network. And I want to start off by telling you a little bit about ourselves. We are a state-funded agency focused on engaging the communities to support healthy youth and strong families. There are 42 networks across the state, each focusing on issues specific to their communities. The Issaquah Community Network is authorized to work within the Issaquah School District and within the Issaquah School District boundaries, and since 1992, we have focused on youth suicide prevention, teen drug and alcohol abuse reduction, and that's one reason that we sponsor the Drug-Free Community Coalition, reducing teen risky behaviors, and most recently, reducing youth homelessness. For the past 2 years, we have, thanks to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, we have also been addressing youth joblessness and with a special focus on youth with disabilities. So tonight I want to talk to you about the Youth Job Skills Fair. I just handed out the flyer for you. It is being held on Saturday, March 9th at Issaquah High School. It's the second Youth Job Skills Fair that we've held. In the last one, we had 100 students. We're hoping to have 200 students attend this time. It's open to all youths in the region, not just Issaquah School District, who are aged 14 through 24. And those who attend will be, first of all, have a keynote speaker who will talk about work ethic and the things that you need to do to find and keep a job. We'll have breakout sessions about how to write resumes, how to do interview skills, how to do social networking, the kinds of social etiquette that you need to, again, be in the workplace. And finally, we will pair students with specific career mentors during a lunch period. So it's going to be a nice full day of focus on how teens can find jobs. So we, at this point, as we started publicity on this a week and a half ago, we already have 65 young people registered, so we're very excited. And we have 35 mentors who have already signed up to act as mentors to young people, so we're very excited about that. We too have lots of partners from the Sammamish area, the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce, Sammamish Rotary, the Sammamish Youth Board, and we're also very excited to have a grant from the City of Sammamish, so thank you very, very much. Any questions for us?
Questions for Barbara? Just a comment, Barbara, this is open to any resident of Sammamish between the ages of 14 and 24.
That's right. The video contest is for students within the Issaquah School District, but this event is open to anyone in the region. And that is because we're partnering with the Snoqualmie Valley Network and the East Side Network.
Okay.
So it's basically open to any young person on the east side.
Okay. And aside from the job hunt aspect of things, this strikes me as being a good way for those who may be thinking about applying for college to sharpen their interview skills for that as well. So people who are either heading out directly into the workforce or who may be looking at college would benefit from going to this.
We emphasize with our mentors to talk about everything from entry level, how to get that summertime job, all the way up through college and graduate school. We have doctors and lawyers who come and talk to the students. We have auto repair people who come and talk to the students, graphic artists. We have a whole range of career fields that they can explore, some of which require college and some of which do not.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you.
So next I have Greg Nelson. Is Greg here?
Thank you. I'm Greg Nelson. I'm with William E. Bucket Incorporated. We're a small builder in the city. Our address is 2630 116th Avenue Northeast in Bellevue. And I'm just here to offer my support and hope that the council gives as much consideration as possible to David Hoffman, who will speak later, regarding the position on the raising of the impact fees for the park and roads. It's roughly around $600. In the grand scheme of things, it may not seem like much, but anecdotally, I noticed when we're discussing the level of service, one of the projects was the Issaquah Pine Lake Road, which I paid into with projects 15 to 20 years ago with King County. Now, I know the city received the short end of that stick when it got annexed, or I mean incorporated. However, and probably never saw a cent of that money, so I'll have the honor, but probably not the pleasure, of paying again for other projects for the same project again. Although I'm sure what's happened is that project has probably changed over time. 20 years ago, standards change. I notice now in the plans that you're using, and we are using, rain gardens and other techniques in the development of projects. It's all the more reason that I just wish the city would consider looking at this holistically rather than just arbitrarily putting a raise in the fees. I know you have a tough job trying to make the budgets and balance. We have a tough job out there. It's been a really tough 5 years. And what this would mean is like 3 more trees in the yard, or something like that. We're going to be looking at, where do you come up with this, or can we get somebody else? Can this be a pass-through or pass-on? And it's just tough right now. So I just would hope, again, you give your strongest consideration to David when he gets up here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that leads us to David Hoffman.
After that glowing endorsement. I'm David Hoffman with the Master Builders Association. Address is 335 116th Avenue Southeast in Bellevue. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about the impact fee ordinances before you tonight. I hope you all received the correspondence that I sent to you yesterday. I had another correspondence with Councilmember Witten. Thank you for that. And I'm here really to comment on behalf of all of our members who have built many of the communities in Sammamish. I'm sure that some of you may live in some of the communities that our members built over the years. As was expressed in our letter, the Master Builders is strongly opposed to these ordinances. We see no point in adopting a fee increase tonight, while also asking the Planning Commission to later this year review the level of service standards and transportation improvement plan, both items which have a direct effect on the impact fee amount. This afternoon, a letter from our association, written 6 years ago at the height of the building boom, was pulled from the archives. The letter dated November 8th, 2006, ironically 19 days before I came to work for the Master Builders, complements the city's lengthy and detailed public review process, which the city went through before adopting its first impact fee ordinance. The ordinance adopted in 2006 was not only the first traffic impact fee ordinance written by the city and adopted by the city, it was and still is the highest traffic impact fee ordinance in the state of Washington. A lengthy and involved process was appropriate. Our letter also said, the 2006 letter said that we strongly encourage the city to continue this level of public involvement for all major legislative amendments, an encouragement that remains true today. We did not state that we supported the fees. In fact, in the third paragraph, we reiterated that the city was well aware that we strongly disagree with the use of impact fees as a funding mechanism. Our compliments to the city had to do with the process, including extensive outreach, public hearings, and stakeholder involvement. It has been 6 years since this fee was adopted. Since then, we've been through the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. In those intervening years, the city has had the opportunity to change the fees, including a reduction of over $1,000 in 2009. But those changes were not made. Now the choices are to increase the fees today and possibly again later in the year after the level of service is gone through and we've recalculated the fees, or wait until the Planning Commission is finished with their work involving the stakeholders and the public while choosing to make a prudent decision based on 2013 numbers, not plans and numbers that were arrived at during the building boom. After a discussion this afternoon with Community Development Director Grohl, our concerns about the expansion of administrative authority to increase fees have been alleviated, so I withdraw that concern. Those of us who are business owners or who have friends who are realize that our economy is still in a time of incredible uncertainty. There are considerable unknowns at all levels of government, and adding higher fees, particularly when these fees are going through a comprehensive review later this year, would send a negative message to the home building industry and the business community. I'm sorry?
Are you very close to your conclusion?
One sentence left.
Thank you.
Please take a cautious and thoughtful approach to any fee increases and wait until a full review has been completed. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. That ends the formal sign-up list. At this point, I'm going to ask if there are others in the audience who have not spoken who wish to address the council at this time. Seeing none, I am going to declare public comment closed. We are closed. So we are now at the point for approval of the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember James.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to exclude items 2 and 3 from the consent agenda and approve the remainder.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to pull items 2 and 3 from the consent agenda and for further discussion. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
You have a right unilaterally to pull it because it's by consent.
But this
You
was
don't-
to approve the agenda as amended.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. By a vote of 7-0, the agenda is, consent agenda is approved. We will deal with items 2 and 3 under unfinished business, which is right now. Assuming there are no public hearings, I guess.
Mr. Mayor, if I may suggest, do we have the planning commission candidates are here? They've been patiently waiting here for us, sir. With the council indulgence, let's just put the item 2 and 3 to perhaps after the planning commission.
Well, let's move unfinished business to after the interviews, the whole section. Okay, so with that, we have under new business, planning commission applicants, interviews. The story here is we originally thought we had 3 applicants for the planning commission. It turns out that 2 of the emails dealing with applications from 2 other individuals were somehow sent astray. But the individuals in question did apply within the guideline deadline. So we are going to give the 2 people who applied the opportunity to address the, to talk to the council about their interests and that sort of thing. And Melanie is motioning to me that we have one of the 2 present, and I believe that's Philip Churian. So I'm going to ask Mr. Churian to come up to the podium. And while he's walking up there, we'd like you to start with your name and address for the record, and also we'll give you up to 3 minutes to talk to us about why you're applying for the Planning Commission. Yes, we have your paperwork, don't worry about that. But we'd like to hear from you personally, what motivated you to do this, and what you hope to get out of it, and what you would like to do for the city. Afterward, we'll give up to a couple of minutes for Q&A for the council. So, go ahead, sir.
Sounds good. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Philip Cherian. My address is 26534 Southeast 25th Street, Sammamish, 98075. Thank you for hearing me. I'm here to apply for the position on the Planning Commission, and I have a couple of reasons why I'm applying. First and foremost, I have 2 young children, and I want to be a role model to them. I recently became a U.S. citizen, and I would like to participate in the process, and what better way to participate than to participate where you live, give back to the community. I've lived in Sammamish with my wife since 2004. We are planning to, we've set our roots here, we're going to be here for a long time. I have a vested interest in seeing Sammamish grow to its maximum potential. And I mentioned being a role model to my kids also. There have been a couple of things that have opened my eyes to the city growing. I've been here since 2004. I know that's not as long as some of you have been here, but I've seen things grow. I remember when 228 was much narrower. That was back in the day. I've seen other things come up. I've seen this entire area come up. The city is growing. I'd like to provide input, participate in the process. Those are my primary reasons for applying for the position.
Okay. Finished?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Shurin? Councilmember Whitten.
if there was a matter, regulation, proposed regulation coming before you to make a recommendation on, that would have significant benefit to the environment, but an equally commiserate harm to individual property owners, how would you vote on it? All things being equal in terms of equal significant help for the environment versus significant harm to individuals. How would you vote on that?
I would have to actually look at the issue in detail. I don't think that that would be
I would
something.
say it's a buffer.
I'm sorry?
Say it's a buffer.
I'd have to look at both sides of the argument to know, and I'd have to look at, so I don't think it's just my opinion. I'd have to listen to my peers also, because I'm sure that they would have opinions and insight into what the other issues might be that I may not have access to at that moment. It would have to be a thought-through decision that I'd come to. I don't believe that I could answer that just yes or no, given that there's ramifications on both sides.
I guess my question really is, do you have a bias more in favor of the environment or more in favor of property rights?
Again, it depends on the situation. I think that I can't say that unless I study the situation, I don't think I would be able to go either way.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, let me ask the question a slightly different way. Environment versus development. Same answer or different?
So we're lucky. Sammamish is a city that has a lot of parks, a lot of trees. There's a reason why my wife and I moved to Sammamish. I'd like to preserve that. So that would be way heavily in my decision. Did I answer your question, Mayor?
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your involvement in the HOA.
Our president quit summarily 2 years ago, and there was no one to take on the position, and our daughter was born, and there was just no one to take the position on, and I said, you know, I know I don't have spare time on my hands right now, but I'm willing to take it on. So it's been a lot of fun. It gave me the opportunity to get to know the neighbors better, hear what their concerns were, figure out, just work with the treasurer of our homeowners association, just things that I had never done before.
Okay. Being on the Plan Commission involves a fair amount of time investment. The current Plan Commission is meeting at least twice a month for 4 to 5 hours at a stretch. Maybe that's pushing it too much, 3 or 4 hours at a stretch, with additional preparation time, a lot of reading material, that sort of thing. In view of what you just said about not having time for one thing, does that situation still exist today, or has something changed?
It does not. And I have permission from my boss, my wife.
Okay. No further questions? Councilmember James.
In the effort of full disclosure, I know Philip. I know his wife Gretchen, who's a school teacher, and Philip approached me, I don't know, has it been a couple years, maybe around the time, 3 years ago, and said, John, I want to get more involved. The time might be right today, but when it is, I'll show up at City Hall, and here you are. And Philip is a very conscientious individual. He's obviously been thinking about this for a while, and I'm glad you showed up here tonight and submitted your application.
Thank you.
John, as long as you're doing the full disclosure thing, I guess I had better as well. Philip's wife Gretchen and my wife Ruth taught together at Blackwell, and I've actually known Phil for a number of years, and he also approached me on this subject a while back, and he alerted in the fact that we were going to have this process, and here he is. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, Phil did get involved very recently with his homeowners association on the Notch annexation issue. He was on the winning side of that. I still appreciated his showing up and being involved in that. So, anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have the second individual, Richard Greenwell?
I don't think he did make it tonight, but I did want to let you know that he tried very, very hard. He just called me today, and I just found out today that he had applied and I hadn't gotten his email. He tried really hard to reschedule he had to go out of town. He tried to reschedule it and he just couldn't do that, but, so, just to let you know that he did try to come here tonight. He was interested in coming here very much, so.
Okay, thank you. I think in view of the circumstances surrounding this and the short notice to Mr. Greenwell, let his non-appearance tonight should not be held against him. That's my opinion, at least. Okay, thank you. So we are now going to return to unfinished business for consent agenda items 2 and 3. Mr. James, this was your motion.
Yes.
Do you wish to address it?
Yes. In light of the testimony that we received here, and I think it was made clear to the council that not doing a cost of living increase was an oversight on the staff's part, and seeing as we're still in an economic recession and we're going through transportation level of service this year, I think it behooves us to not pull the trigger on an increase at this time and do a holistic approach and see what we have on our plate and perhaps tackle it at the end of the year. The other point I wanted to make is there was something that might be noteworthy. Amend the state legislature 2011 to increase time allowed to expand impact fees from 6 years to 10 years. I do think having that kind of flexibility does serve the city well. So I don't know if we can do this in two parts, tackle the second item as a positive and maybe postpone the first item with the fee increases to later this year.
Councilmember Whitten.
A question for staff. From what I was reading on this point, am I understanding that it was through oversight we haven't increased this in the past, but that we have an ordinance already in place that requires us to increase it for cost of living type adjustment?
That's correct.
So our ordinance already requires that?
Well, we could make a resolution to suspend the ordinance because we haven't enforced it.
It's council pleasure, if you want to do that. I mean, but your ordinance says that it requires the cost of living adjustments. I want you to also know that it was a perhaps right coincidence that it was not brought back when the inflation was low. The bids that we were getting on the road projects were still kind of favorable. But currently, things are changing a little bit different direction. So, it's your call.
Further comment from council? Did you have something, John? Okay.
John Crowell.
I'll just remind everybody, as smart as everybody is up here, and anybody out there listening, this is a pass-along fee to the home buyer. This is not absorbed by the builder, so this just adds to the additional cost of somebody we would welcome as a new neighbor to our city that, oh, by the way, we'll charge you an extra $600 on the house.
Like it was an analogy too, that could be 3 trees that they could plant in lieu of that.
Right.
That's what was given as an analogy.
All right, we're going to
We
hold
talked
them
for
to
20 minutes about raising their water fees $5.
Councilmember Jaron.
I would support Councilmember James' notion of deferring until the later in the year when we actually get the level of service standard back from staff.
Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Valderrama.
Yeah, I would also support the motion of waiting until we have a holistic approach with the information from the level of service.
Have you made a motion?
I alluded to a motion, maybe I should make it specific.
Allude to a motion.
Let's do it first before we call the question of the case.
Well,
Councilmember
can I do a motion in 2 parts?
Why don't you just do a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the inflationary adjustment but also to align our current ordinance with RCW 82.02, giving the city from 6 years to 10 years to expend the impact fees.
I'll second that.
Oh, can I make a
Councilmember Witten.
we have both parks and roads. We're not doing anything level of service with parks, we just went through our plan. So I think we need to deal with those separately. You're trying to amend the traffic mitigation fees
That's
is
the way
one
I
thing, so let's take them separately, because your arguments and rationale are valid for the road one, but not for the parks one.
But I think there's separate resolutions. Isn't
They are
number
separate
3?
resolutions.
But he, sounds like he's trying to make it for both of them.
Not necessarily, but I'll defer to clarification to do them separately.
Thank you.
I believe the proper thing to do would in fact be to take them separately, as Councilmember Witten suggests. And her point that we do have a valid parks plan is well taken. So from that standpoint, I feel we can move forward on that. Personally, I would be in favor of the imposition of the fee increase as of now. We're not doing it retroactively. And a $600 increase on the price of a house in Sammamish is frankly, in the larger scheme of things, not overwhelming. But I can see the sense of the council is to push this off to the point where we have had further discussion in the planning commission. So I will go along with it reluctantly.
Call the question.
Okay, we're going to take these individually. We're looking at bill number 2, which is to, let's see.
Exhibit 1 of Bill 2, which is the streets.
Section 1 of Bill 2, rather. And that is for the, regarding the increase in the street impact fees by 3.51% and thereafter to adjust annually for inflation. Those in favor of deleting this particular portion of this bill, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 6 to 1, the motion is passed. Now, we have to return to the other part of it, which is the parks impact fees, which is also a 3.51% increase in the impact fees, adjusted annually thereafter for inflation. And this one, as was talked about earlier, is not tied to the Transportation Improvement Program. So, all in favor of...
I'll make a motion to
Okay.
adopt that.
I would second. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the Parks Impact Fee increase of 3.51%, and thereby increase it annually afterwards. All of-
And the 10 years?
discussion?
And the 10 years?
And the 10-year,
Expenditure authorization.
obligation. Now, there's been a call for discussion, and my apologies to the council, I went right past that. Is there discussion on
Yeah,
this issue?
I have a question
Mhm.
to staff. How much does that percentage equate to in fees?
$91.
Is that what it is?
Okay, I can live with that.
Okay. Further discussion?
Call the question.
The question's been called. All in favor of increasing the parks impact fee by 3.51% with annual adjustments per inflation afterward, up for 10 years, and a 10-year window to use the money, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. by a vote of 7-0. This one carries.
Which ordinance is that, please?
And this is ordinance 02013-342.
Mr. Mayor, clarification, on the first one, I thought the Councilmember James' motions also increased the expenditure authority to expend 10 years, so
Yes.
I'm assuming that is included in yours.
That was the intent,
Right,
yes.
right, so just clarification.
Got a little messy there, my apologies. but-
That's all right. Can we take a few minutes break before we go to executive session?
I think that'd be a very good idea.
Let's do that.
So, it is now, by my watch, by the clock back there, 8:45. I'd like to have us all back in here by 10 of. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back from executive session. The first thing I want to do is ask for a motion to extend the meeting. We're past the 10 o'clock hour. Mr. City Manager, how long do you think we'll need?
Probably 20 minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Well, let's we've
Let's
got
do 30 minutes, maybe. I'm hearing council members saying 30 minutes.
Okay, let's, for safety's sake, we'll extend to 10:45.
Okay.
Okay.
So move.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries, thank you. Okay, we are going to our business and go directly to city manager reports. After that, we'll come back to the resolutions, the 4 resolutions regarding the commission issue. So, Mr. City Manager, would you please give us your report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the council. At the last regular council meeting, you asked for a response to 4 issues identified by Kinder Case Attorney Charlie Clinch in his January 15, 2013 email. We have our city attorney. He will give a report. But before we have Bruce to give his report on those 4 items, I did ask our Community Development Director, Cameron Gural, to give us a brief report on the latest proposal. I want to say that it's a brief report. This thing was presented to us, and everybody's moving in a very fast timeline on this thing for obvious reasons. This was presented to us a Thursday afternoon. Monday was holiday, so it's literally the couple days that we've been looking at it. But we do have a preliminary report. I'm going to have the Cameron Gural to give that report, then I'm going to ask our city attorney to give us his report on the 4-point that was raised previously. Cameron?
Thank you, Ben. I'll quickly go through this. The council will remember the previous design that we showed you. We had done this little cartoon to show it a little more clearly on the overheads with the 2 parcels and the Ace Hardware store, the associated parking and truck turnaround, and then a stormwater system. The new revision does change the site plan dramatically. No longer is the city parcel involved, and instead, as you heard earlier in the proponent's comments, you've got the Ace building kind of tucked up next to the street and along the city property line entirely on the Severson parcel. So the major changes here: no city land exchange, no boundary line adjustment, city stormwater functions wouldn't be affected. Parking would be at grade under the building, the elevator access. It is a smaller total footprint because you have parking underneath the building, but unfortunately the footprint is closer to George Davis Creek. As described in the applicant's materials, the truck access plan is still not clear as to how you'd actually be able to do deliveries to this. I want to remind the council this site is 100% constrained with the features that are shown there on your overhead. We've gone through that detail before. We showed you our version of the constraints. This comes actually from the wetland study submitted by the proponent group. The outline that I'll use my cursor, the outline along this outer edge here is the buffer for the site. In green here is the wetland buffer coming from the wetland to the south of the site and east. The blue portion where the buffers overlap is from the stream, These are the sites, so these buffers extend from the features out across, in fact, across 228th, so the sites are 100% constrained, unfortunately. This is where the building would be shown using the latest revision, approximately. So the revision would still require a number of things, as described by Mr. Kling earlier and Mr. Severson. We still, if you're going to pursue this, you would need the roadmap that they've outlined, change to policy regulations, major changes to environmental regulations, also to net density and the floor area ratio standards. Need to take action by emergency ordinance, so no planning commission review. We need to not only create a development agreement code, but also negotiate a development agreement to address a variety of different issues, including potential for mitigation of impacts that might be on city-owned land or elsewhere. We'd have to issue a SEPA DNS or MDNS. This project could not result in a DS. And rapid is probably an understatement in terms of the time frame for approval for all relevant permits and no appeals for all of this to work. Permit requirement summary, I won't go through all of these, but these are all of the steps. Each of these has a step, a review component, often a public notice and opportunity for comment and appeal component, and then some of them actually take time to actually work. The only time frame that I've been able to show on here is one we've heard from the applicant team, which is construction of the site. That is the grading work, potentially even the foundation, could take up to 90 days. It's a very tough site to work in. Other issues needing review and resolution, as I said, the safe truck and delivery access. Right now they're proposing something that would either be in the travel lane or on the sidewalk, and we're not sure how that's going to work. Stormwater management still needs to be dealt with from the building itself. It is a good point that the applicant raised that they're not creating the dirty water. They still do create more storm water, and so we'd have to figure out how that would apply under our code. The other issues I won't take the council's time to look at. I remain concerned about water and sewer district, and we really haven't seen any information regarding that, and that's always an issue that needs to be dealt with. So staff conclusions, the revision solves a couple of problems, but still involves a large footprint, somewhere on the order of 12,000 square feet. The building itself is 11.2, but to construct it, you're going to need a larger footprint than that, all within a critical areas buffer. This site, I'm afraid, I still have to report, is still not able to support this type of use due to those constraints, and major policy and code changes would be required. We've previously gone over what the ripple effects and risk would be related to that. Happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Whitten?
Could this site be used for a hardware store if they pursued an RUE permit, reasonable use exception?
Reasonable use exception is something that's allowed under our code. Again, hardware store is not an allowed use in the zone at this time, so I would reject that kind of application at the door. Now, they could apply for a different use that is allowed in the code, and there are a number of uses beyond office, commercial uses that are allowed in the code today. And what our code says is that reasonable use exception can be approved, but only after you go through a process. It has to be the use that has the least potential impact on the site. Hardware store, of the array of uses that we've seen here, probably is, I'm sorry to report, the most potential use, just because the footprint that's required. So I'm afraid the answer is no for hardware use, and then we'd have to entertain a proposal and go through the process for some other use.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Valderrama.
Yes, Cameron, I understand what the last meeting, we had directed our council to look at the proposal that had been presented by Kinder Ace and to talk about development agreements with the cities that had been mentioned, Tacoma, Tukwila, and Bellevue, and do we have some feedback on that?
Yes, I provided the council with a summary of that at your last meeting in a memo form, and then I revised the memo to include Tacoma. We had spoken with them late that day. None of the cities all have some code provisions that either allow for a development agreement or have code provisions that relate to something called a critical areas report or a reasonable use exception in Bellevue that has a lot of code associated with it. We don't find any of those codes to be sufficient to approve this proposal, and in speaking with the staff for those cities, we sort of queried based on this set of facts whether this type of proposal could qualify under their adopted codes, and the answer was unfortunately uniformly no.
Thank you.
Councilmember Curley.
Cameron, you showed a slide earlier, I think there were 12 steps until Tim can get in there and sell a hammer. Can you go back a couple of slides that shows the 12? Right there. At each one of those steps, how many times is the public involved in a public hearing? Just off the top of your head as you look at those 12.
Well, there's a public hearing required for a development agreement. This type of proposal requires a commercial site development permit here in the city of Sammamish. Someone can appeal an issuance of a CSDP permit, and that results in a hearing before the hearing examiner.
Right.
The SEPA review is also an appealable action, again, going to the hearing examiner. Building permits theoretically are appealable to court. You have public notice being issued, I'd say, at least 3 times here, and so you've got both members of the public as well as agencies that will weigh in almost assuredly and may exercise those appeal rights.
Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, Cameron, the applicant quotes the Sammamish ECA code as, quote, "Buffers may be reduced when buffer reduction impacts are mitigated and the result in equal or greater protection of the stream functions." Have you used that portion of the code in any other?
We have. Typically, and this is very much like the experience of my peers in other cities, it's done in a single-family residential context as opposed to a commercial context. The applicant correctly noted that we do have that section, but he only used a portion in his PowerPoint. That section of code is actually a whole column long in my code book. And so the way it's done is that you essentially can reduce buffer by certain percentages by doing other beneficial things to make up for the lost buffer functions. Much of that is additional mitigation you would do on-site or off-site. We fully explored that opportunity with the applicant team very early on to see if it would be workable here. And the consensus between the applicant team and city staff is that it would not offer, either for the older proposal that used both sites or even for this new proposal, would not offer sufficient buffer reduction because you could not qualify for all of the different steps as our code had been laid out. So the as good or better is kind of a broad statement, but how you get to as good or better is by qualifying under all these various steps.
Okay, Councilmember Whitten. Thank you. Cameron, could you recap for us, please, saying from a timeline point of view, once Ace first walked in the door?
Sure, I'll try to do it very quickly. I believe in the council record we have a couple of chronologies. One of them is on the back of my January 7th memo, which is a part of the council's record here, so that's what I'll kind of summarize from. We first heard about this in November 2011. Remember, it was November 18th, 2011. City Manager Ben Yazici had been speaking with Smash Ace Hardware owner and called me into his office and said, we need to do everything we can to try to help this local business. That resulted in a lot of work for me personally and also with a variety of city staff to quickly investigate other sites where ACE might be able to move to. City manager also recognized that even with our best efforts at the time, the Ace Hardware had only, I think, 7 or 7.5 months to work with. So the city manager contacted the landlord and was able to secure for Ace a year-long extension of that lease. So they gave us much more breathing room to work with. City team continued to work to identify properties in the city that were able to accommodate this type of use. We favored properties that were properly zoned, sufficient in size, and free enough of environmental constraints, and then also met the business needs of Ace Hardware, that they would be located along an arterial so that it would be viable from a business standpoint. We did look at the site that the Kinder Ace team has been proposing for the last couple of months. We did not pursue it for the reasons that I've described earlier.
because of zoning and environmental constraints. We did pursue a number of other sites, brought those sites to Mr. Koch and his Realtor to investigate further. They went off and did the investigation for their own feasibility, contacting property owners, and we went through that process for several weeks. We also tried to advise Mr. Koch on the process necessary for going through and constructing his own building, that even with the extended timeline with the additional lease amount, it was going to be very tight. Typical standalone commercial construction is something that often takes at least a year, often the better part of 2 years to go through permitting, site construction, and then actual building and occupancy. And we also recommended that he seek outside advice from a business feasibility standpoint, moving from being a lease business to a standalone own the building type of business is a big change. Helped him find other sources for business planning, etc. Eventually, Mr. Koch found a property in the town center, negotiated, I think, an option to purchase that property, came to us. We recognized it also had challenges. It was, from an access point of view, only had right-in, right-out type of access. And we knew that he was not going to be able to, at least in an initial phase, execute exactly what the town center plan wanted. We used every tool we could in the adopted town center plan and code to help him move forward. Worked with his team of consultants for several months. We drafted up timelines for how long it would take. Even those timelines were aggressive and optimistic at the time. We went through, I think, at least 3 pre-application meetings, which is a standard process for our town center planning process. Those meetings, I attended everyone but one. Personally, to help make sure that I understood where we were and what we needed to do. Those meetings were intended to give that team as much good input as possible to design the site. Mr. Koch and others did raise issues about cost. Both the land cost, I'm sure, was not low. The cost of going through the permitting process, design, etc. There are mitigation fees that our code would require, and that was part of the reason why we identified the need for good business planning on his part to make sure that he knew what he was getting into. I don't want to sound in a kind of a finger-wagging mode, but we were really trying to work in a cooperative fashion to make sure that we tried to retain this business. It's very important that the business was viable at the end of the day, so we tried to take that into account. We exercised as many opportunities as we could under our code to allow for a phased project that would allow for surface parking in the near term, for a single-story store instead of a 2-story or mixed-use type of building, as long as we could be assured that the adopted town center regulations could be honored in future phases. We weren't able to get to that point because Mr. Koch let the team go. Brought in a new team. We spent 2 more pre-application meetings educating that new team. It's frustrating for me, I'll tell you that, because I don't think we used our time very efficiently at the end of that process. We were then told that that project was going to be abandoned, and so we ceased any further work on that particular project. A couple of months went by. We would check in with Tim Koch from time to time, and he'd say he's still working and still hopeful. And then in the end of September, we got a call from the Kinderace team, and they did submit a docket application, a timely submittal. We worked with them before coming to the City Council in December, as we always do, and as what our code requires, to give you a recommendation. At the time, you'll recall my memo from November 18th, ironically, 1 year after originally hearing about this, to the City Council, or to the City Manager, provided to the Council to say, the Kinderace site is not a site that can accommodate this use. And try as we might, we cannot figure out a path to do so. We've, since that time, with all of the public input, we've been continuing to try. We met, as I reported before, 4 times over the holiday period between December 11th and January 8th. to help work through issues, tried to still have a problem-solving type of attitude, but we cannot find a way, from my perspective, to solve this problem on that site. We've also brought to you a couple of staff reports on January 8th, January 15th, and tonight. We've seen different iterations from the Kinder Ace team. To their credit, they are trying to find ways of solving this problem, and I think they are investing some money in site review and engineering time. Our staff has met, if not immediately, on a very short notice basis each time to talk with Kinder Ace and see if we could find a way to deal with this. Up until including last Thursday, on an impromptu thing when two members of the team came in to City Hall, and I briefly had a chance to speak with them. Given all of what you have heard, I wish I had something different to report. Ben has asked me multiple times, if there's a way to do this, I want you to do it. And we have tried to employ that ethic since November of 2011. I wish I could solve this problem for you. I don't think I can, and in fact, I'm sure I can.
Thank you, Cameron. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Cameron. I'm going to ask the city attorney, Bruce Deason, to respond to those 4 points that the council specifically asked us to respond at the last meeting. So, and I apologize, Bruce was literally sick today. I mean, this is not what he wanted to do this day, but we have to do it. So, Bruce, could you please go through your report?
Yes, thank you, Ben. Apologize for the voice. Sound sexier, at least? No? As has been pointed out, council directed staff to respond to the 4 issues raised by Mr. Kling, Kinder Ace's attorney, in an email sent on January 15th. And you further requested that staff provide a recommendation on how to proceed with regard to the proposal. Tonight, I'll give you a report on those 4 issues with the insertion of a footnote pointing out that since the time of the, since the time of that email, as recently as last week, the proposal that was addressed in Mr. Kling's email has been changed. You heard what the nature of that those changes are, but I suspect that most of what I will have to tell you is equally applicable to the new proposal as with regard to the original proposal. A fair amount of time has been spent with regard to discussing the availability of the use of a development agreement for the purposes of accomplishing this project. And it is Kinder Ace's belief that that is an appropriate mechanism to use, that it gives council great flexibility in terms of crafting a solution to the problems raised by the Kinder Ace project. Council will also recall that they have heard from Attorney Mike Walter from our insurance authority, who has been offered his assistance and guidance based upon his experience. And you'll recall in open session, Mr. Walters said that, and I think I'm quoting, but he'll correct me if I'm wrong, he'll quote, "I've never seen a development agreement attempted to be used to address wetland buffers. I'm not aware of any court decision addressing this point. You folks would be the test case for that." And I concur in that statement. There isn't any specific case law to guide us on the scope of development agreements. My experience has been with development agreements has been much more of for purposes of vesting rights, for setting forth development and construction schedules, and for addressing a variety of things, but did not address, as in this case, a request to amend a city's comprehensive plan, change its development regulations. As Cameron explained earlier, Mr. Kling was kind enough to bring to our attention code provisions from a number of other cities that have adopted language that seems to provide fair amount, if not a great amount, of flexibility when using a development agreement. Kevin's already outlined what his findings were, but to the extent that I have reviewed them, it appears that in no instance in any of the cities identified has a development agreement been used to the extent and for the purposes identified here. I know that Tukwila has used the development agreement code for only 2 projects. Neither of those projects resulted in any change or variation of that city's building code, fire code, zoning code, or critical area regulations. In Tacoma, they have a code that's been offered and does, you look at that code, it seems to be pretty broad-based in its approach, but it's my understanding that in discussions with Tacoma staff, they indicated they would not use a development agreement to affect the major change, any major changes to environmental standards. Lastly, Bellevue was contacted. Their code is quite precise. It does allow some variations with regard to both commercial and residential sites, but it would not apply in the situation we are faced with here, where the site is 100% constrained by environmental limitations. So, yes, there are a handful of codes that provide greater flexibility than we find in our code, and which also offer language that seems to be rather liberal in its expression. But in reality, those codes have not been used to the extent that is being sought here, and if anything, there appears to be either a lack of desire or a belief that the codes that have been adopted allowed such broad-based proposals to be made. Nevertheless, neither I, Mr. Walter, or Mr. Kling can tell you that you cannot use a development agreement. What we are telling you is that were you to do so, in effect, you would be making the law in the event of a challenge. And the challenge may not be brought. We don't know. But let me address that later. But effectively, council would be using a development agreement in a manner that, in my experience, has not been used in the state of Washington. In addition to being your legal advisor, I try to also give practical advice based upon, I hate to admit it, 40 years of experience of practicing law. I have done a lot of land use work, and I've negotiated many development agreements. My principal concern when this project first came forward was not legal so much as it was practical. I looked at the timeline that was identified for bringing an Ace Hardware store to this chosen site, and it was a vastly different timeline than any I am familiar with when negotiating a development agreement. Essentially, it would require that there be no delays, no disagreements, no differing interpretations concerning what can and cannot be accomplished in the timelines in regard thereto. I'm a generally optimistic individual, but again, in my experience, I've never negotiated a development agreement in which the parties were 100% agreement on 100% of the terms. It always required some amount of negotiation, some amount of back and forth discussion, some amount of compromise. The typical amount of time that I have experienced with negotiating development agreements is in terms of months, sometimes years. I've never had the occasion to negotiate a development agreement in a matter of days. Does that mean it cannot be done? No. I'm just sharing with you my experience. You have received a couple versions of a roadmap that the Kinder Ace folks have been kind enough to prepare. And I have to, tip my hat to them. They've been working very hard to try and make this thing go. I will also tip my hat to city staff that has been putting in a remarkable number of hours on this project in an effort to see that it can go forward. But even if the city were to fast-track this proposal, put every other item of city business aside to devote their full time and attention to this, I don't know that it's realistic to expect that the project could be accomplished with the items that need to be done within the time frame that's required to meet the deadline that's been imposed or identified. One of the trickier aspects of developing a development agreement is that we have a general idea of what the project is. It's to build a hardware store. But as council knows from reviewing other land use applications, just knowing what your end goal is doesn't get you very far when it comes to applying the comprehensive plan and development regulations of this city or any other city, for that matter. And the absence of having an application in this instance makes that even more challenging. In the normal course of events, a property owner or his representative or her representative presents the city with a development application which identifies certain basic information, and based upon the basic information and reports that may be prepared, environmental or engineering and so forth, a development agreement is negotiated. So you have, in effect, a template before you upon which to base the development agreement. In this instance, we're doing it in a different fashion. We're reversing the process. We're attempting to negotiate, if you direct us to, the development agreement in the absence of an application. Well, I may be pretty good at negotiating contracts, but it's awfully hard to anticipate all the various contingencies that go into negotiating a contract, such a development agreement, and that's what a development agreement is, it's a contract, without knowing the particulars of the details. If that's what council wants us to do, we will do that. It's not the norm. It almost creates a position where I'm sure we're going to leave something out because it wasn't taken into account. It's, we're rushing around to get to a goal, and sometimes in the rush of business, you can't remember all the things that you might otherwise if you had additional time to contemplate the various issues. Another factor that's of concern to staff is we're dealing with a highly, as I've said, constrained piece of property due to its location to wetlands and a stream, and it's 100% covered by environmental buffers. It's anticipated, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but in my discussions with the Kinder Ace folks and listening to the discussions that have occurred in this chamber, it's anticipated that a mitigated determination of non-significance would be issued as the SEPA outcome. And that may be possible. We don't know. One of the things we would need would be an environmental review of the property. But I can tell you that to the extent that I've dealt with highly regulated properties, whether it's due to wetlands, steep slopes, whatever the case may be, an MDS isn't always guaranteed. In Mr. Walters and my discussion with the Kinder Ace folks, they indicated that if they were required to do an environmental impact statement, in other words, if they did not receive a mitigated determination of non-significance, the amount of time required to complete that item would kill the project. They just don't have that amount of time. Even under the scenario that an MD&S would be issued Again, it's been my experience that there's always a certain amount of negotiation that goes involved in issuing an MD&S because the government agency that serves as the environmental reviewer has to follow appropriate steps to make sure that the property in its development does not adversely affect the environment in general. And typically, there's some negotiation on what type of mitigation is appropriate, the size, the shape, the location. And that's just a normal course of business. Nothing unusual about that. But the point I'm trying to make is that, too, requires time. And time just doesn't seem to be a commodity that we have in this particular project. Another factor that I will admit is speculative, but again seems reasonably likely to me, based upon my experience, is that the city might get a challenge of some kind to this project. It could be an environmental challenge from people who are concerned that this project would somehow degrade the city's environmental regulations. It could be a challenge from adjacent property owners who think that the project might adversely affect their property. It could be a challenge from other citizens within the community who feel that they haven't been treated in the same manner as this particular property owner, and so on. What I'm giving you is a speculative parade of horribles, but it's a parade that I think is more likely than not. In speaking with Mr. Kling and his folks, they're pretty confident that no challenges will be raised. I think that everyone I've spoken to believes that Ace Hardware is a great place and we should try and keep it if we can. And I've heard that expressed by council members. I've heard that expressed by the city manager. I've heard that expressed by our community development director. Your marching orders have been very clear to us that if we can do it, you should do it. Again, the likelihood of a challenge is speculative, but I think it's more likely than not. And if any challenge is filed, there goes the timeline, there goes the schedule, there goes the project. You folks get to make that decision. What I'm sharing with you is my observations and my experience. Fortunately, I don't have to make the decision, but I can tell you that that projects within this city, and I've been your city attorney since the beginning, subdivision projects have been subject to a number of environmental challenges, both large and small. You have an active environmental community here. Because of that, I would expect that at such time as an application is filed, it will receive a fair amount of scrutiny. Whether that scrutiny will translate to litigation, I don't know. But I can tell you that on more than one occasion in this city, it has led to litigation. And that worries me because of the timeline we're facing. So, in sum, Kinder Ace has asked for decisive action. They're entitled to decisive action. We need to make a decision. Pardon me. It's easy for me to say. You need to make a decision. They've indicated they need a decision no later than your next meeting, February 5th. In discussing this matter with staff and outside counsel and reviewing it myself, we don't think that it's reasonable to ask the city to make all the changes that are required to accomplish this particular goal. Putting that aside, it's our view that if you direct the city staff to proceed, the timeline is unrealistic, highly unlikely. But more importantly, the question I think for the city council is, whatever decision you make will be a matter of public policy. Whether you go forward, whether you go backwards. This is the first time in the history of the city you've been faced with such a unique problem in which a problem has been brought to you. It's a popular subject. It's one that probably everybody sitting in this chamber is supportive of, but it's a project that demands you to take action and to do things in a time frame that's never been asked before. It's a time frame that I've not experienced before. There's nothing in the legislation adopted by the city from the time of its inception that indicates an important public policy issue such as this would be made within a matter of mere weeks. So the question, the typical, and this is a land use matter, but the typical process that government goes through when adopting land use regulations is not short. It is not designed to be short. What it is designed to be, or to provide, is a thorough and a robust and a critical examination of the issues. Here, we don't have the luxury of the time to do that. So, I guess the bottom line question is that when a problem, whether it's this one or any other one, raising significant public policy issues are raised, is should it be subject to the traditional critical, thorough, and public, and I underline the word public, examination that is used when adopting land use regulations? Or is this an exception that warrants putting aside the public process and taking what amounts to an emergency action? So, the recommendation of staff is that because of the number of legal and policy issues raised by the Kinder Ace proposal, staff is not recommending altering the city's comp plan and land use regulations and land use procedures to accommodate this particular project.
Thank you. We are at 10:45. We're at the point where I said we hope to be done. We are not done. I'm going to ask the council's indulgence for another 45 minutes.
30 minutes?
Mr. Mayor?
30 minutes, yes.
You don't have to specify a time. You can just move to extend the meeting until such time as you call adjournment.
I would like to have a motion to extend the meeting.
Can we
So
also defer the appointments then?
No, we can do that quickly. It won't take too long
That
because
will be
you have the
perfect.
forms. We can do that quickly.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Mr. Kling, please sit down. You will not have an opportunity. This is no public comment anymore. Mr. Kling?
Point of clarification? Isn't, I mean, you've heard 45 minutes of information. It seems under the circumstances that, since you're being asked to make decisive action, that having some time for rebuttal under all the circumstances, and as Mr. Eason said, this is a very important issue, maybe the most important issue that the city has ever faced, possibly some time for rebuttal might be appropriate.
Mr. Kling, we've had at least 14 months of this. This is not, there's no rebuttal, there is no more public comment on this issue. This is now a time for council deliberation. Thank you.
But what about the misstatements?
Please sit down.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a statement and a proposed motion. The city of Sammamish first heard about the problem with Ace Hardware in November of 2011, as we have just heard. And since then, it is fair to say that the city and this council has made every effort possible to keep this local business in Sammamish. The city has received the docket application from Kinder Ace in September 2012, and staff has worked with the applicant to review the proposal, identify and resolve numerous challenging issues, and the council has also worked on this process. The Kinder Ace proposal would require major amendments to our adopted comprehensive plan, to the city's land use permit procedures, and to environmental regulations and standards. The proposed site appears to be 100% constrained, as we have heard, by important environmental features, including George Davis Creek, a bog-type wetland, and associated buffers and setbacks. The Kinder Ace proposal, as was cited by our legal counsel, raises a substantial number of significant legal and public policy issues and creates the possible perception of favoritism while working under a time frame that is at best for decisions severely constrained and insufficient. Given the recommendations of staff and the council, we have heard from our legal advisor and outside counsel, and in order for us to have an open discussion and determination on this issue, I therefore move to deny the Kinder Ace proposal and subsequent amendments proposed by the application team and discontinue further work on the proposal. Furthermore, I would ask that the council, as part of this, direct the city manager to continue to work with Ace Hardware to explore other options to relocate elsewhere in Sammamish.
About plan amendment, comp plan amendment.
That would follow on this.
Okay. Is there a second?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded to deny the Kinder Ace docket proposal and all subsequent amendments proposed by the applicant team, and to discontinue further work on the proposal. It has been furthermore proposed to direct the city manager to continue to work with Ace Hardware to explore options to relocate elsewhere in the city of Sammamish. Discussion. Councilmember Whitten.
I have.
Nancy.
I hope they're.
Or Mike.
Nancy, use your mic, please.
First of all, we're stewards for this city. We have to act in the best interests of the city as a whole. I personally am not willing to see the city assume the risks that we've been advised are probably inherent in this project. So that's one very important point. Second point, I guess, is that the proposal asks us to basically play favorites, to treat them differently than anybody else has previously been treated. That bothers me. So that's of concern. But the real issue I have with this is if you step back and take ACE out of the picture, what policy are we setting? What is the precedent we're setting? They are asking us to change our codes that cannot be limited just to the ACE project, but have to be applied even-handedly across the board, however you may uniformly limit it. That is, in my mind, setting a terrible policy for the city. They're asking us, through the development agreement, to permit a project to go forward on a site that's 100% constrained, and basically ignore our environmental codes and get around existing code policies through the development agreement. I am not willing to go there. There is no precedent, as our legal advisors have told us, under case law. The state ordinance law which permits these is not clear. There's no predictor on how it would come out if it was challenged. But the policy I find to be very concerning, and that is that anybody could come in with a project that they want to pursue that can't work under our existing codes, which are pretty flexible. For example, you can mitigate wetlands and reduce buffers up to 50%. But here it's 100% constrained. The policy would be anybody with a project which would be denied under the environmental codes, that they can't do what they want, could come in, claim a developer agreement, and go forward. That's just a terrible policy, and it puts the council in the middle of it. And I want to go back and point out that our policies have been for a long time that this council does not get involved in individual project developments. We did that because we did not want to be subject to political pressure and make poor decisions. That was established through having appeals on projects, not go from the hearing examiner to the council, but to go directly to court. This would dramatically reverse that type of precedent. It would put us in the middle of everybody's project who was unhappy with the application of development codes or some other regulations, and bring it to the council through the supposed application of a development agreement. I do not think that's good policy. I think it's terrible policy for the city and for our residents. So I am going to support the motion to deny the project, because I cannot support the policies that it would be setting for the future. And they came in several weeks ago to us and said, well, we're not going to ask you to do anything you aren't going to be comfortable doing. Well, I can tell you this is one of the most uncomfortable projects I've seen because of the precedent. It's just bad policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Curley.
Tim, this is hard because this is, it's not the best for your business. I would probably have voted for it if somewhere in the packet, your landlord would have to sign the thing that says that from time immemorial, it is a hardware store. From the time you open it to the time this world comes to an end, that is a hardware store, and it could never, ever be anything other than a hardware store. Now, of course, no landlord would ever sign that. No one would ever sign that. But we are being told we need to build this immediately, absolutely immediately, and throw everything out the window because we have an emergency situation that we need a hardware store. Well, if that's the case, then it must be a hardware store forever and ever and ever and ever, and no one would do that. Because you're asking us, I'm not going to get in an argument with you. I'm telling you, you're asking us to build a hardware store. We build a hardware store. 2 years later, they decide, you know what? We don't want it to be a hardware store anymore. Now it's something else. But we built it because it was an emergency. We needed a hardware store. Oh, that's gone now. Something else is in its place. We threw everything out because we needed a hardware store. And then all of a sudden it's gone. You put it in there, have it in, no one ever signed the thing. Hurts me to have to say it, Tim. You worked really hard on it. Everybody in the city worked really hard. We all struggled really, really hard to try to make this thing work. Just, it's not going to work in that spot.
Councilmember James.
I was the one fishing for the Hail Mary or whatever it was that was going to pull this one out, and unfortunately, I'm not given much ammunition to try and approve this. I differ with Councilmember Witten. I wish we had a development agreement, now that we don't. I see the opportunities for us in the future to have one. It won't help us in this situation, and maybe it wasn't even appropriate in this situation, but to say that something is bad in and of itself, I think is not good policy either. I wish we had a better defined reasonable use exception in our code too, which is more like Bellevue's, because I think that gives people false hope as to what they can do and not do. I wish we had a more fair environmentally critical area ordinance. Had this been pre-1999, this project may have been built. I don't know that for a fact, I'm guessing, but time has marched on and it hasn't been very friendly to those that own property. When you look at a property that initially we thought had a 150-foot setback, and then we find out it's a different classification, and it's really 215 feet, and then you throw on an extra 15 foot for setbacks, you're at 230 feet. That's over 3/4 the length of a football field. I think sometimes our problems are man-made, and trying to protect valuable waterways, valuable resources are important. But this is now becoming an urban area. This is not a rural area. And I think even with 50% setback through modifications, we wouldn't be able, even if both parcels were combined, to do what had been proposed today. And I'd like to add, I had no problem putting a P in our ordinance under an emergency to add a hardware store. I think that emergency ordinances are a power that we possess and that we could have done that. The unfortunate thing is that because our hands appear to be tied, even if we did that, it might not get the outcome that we were looking for this evening. I was not even opposed to even trying to sell the site to the Kinder Ace people if that would have helped the cause, because of some of the complaints that we had about trying to do a development agreement before an application, but we hit a brick wall there too. So I think we looked under every rock, we looked in every corner, we checked out every possibility. I think there might be another voice on the council or more that feels the same way I do. But unfortunately, I think we learned a hard lesson that maybe we'll be better prepared if this situation should arise again. And unfortunately, maybe not for Ace.
Deputy Mayor Valderrama.
Yeah, I concur with the statements made before by Councilmember Nancy Whitten and by Councilmember James. I think it's important to remember the public policy issues and the importance it's had already in our planning commission in looking at the comp plans and particularly what they're currently looking at the ECA, environmental critical areas. There's already been questions as to what they're doing and what might be undone here at the council. And so it is a dangerous precedent to set if we're not having more time to think it through. While I disagree with the issue of that we have flexibility, I wish we had seen a lot more flexibility in how this was handled. We do have environmental constraints and ordinances in place. I agree with Councilmember James that we would have been able to put a P in emergency ordinance. But what has not been mentioned to date is we also have a fiduciary responsibility to our citizens. And as we've been talking and looking at it, we have a responsibility that if there are suits against the city, how will the citizens of the city be fully covered for that as well? And so while we love ACE, I think that's been made clear by everybody here, we have a responsibility to the citizens both in the public policy as well as the legal and fiscal areas. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember.
No, they're pointing at each other.
Oh, thank you. Listening to Councilmember James and Valderrama, the zoning change, putting the P in the zoning code is really not that unreasonable, and I'm sure that, I don't know why it wasn't in there in the first place when we passed it, and I guess I'm the only one here that was there when we passed it.
Look in the mirror, Don.
Maybe Nancy's to blame too. Passage of the development agreement code on the fast track may be doable, but it is contrary to the usual ordinance creation methodology that we have here in Sammamish. We probably, more than any city, analyze it before we take any action. I'm really very disappointed that we cannot make this project happen. I feel that the code, as Romero said, the code needs to be more flexible. It's got to have built into it the ability to maintain or enhance the environmental conditions while allowing urban-type uses within the city limits. I just don't, FutureWise came to us when we were passing our original comprehensive plan. And FutureWise are 1,000 Friends of Washington, and I guess until they didn't have 1,000 friends anymore, said that, you're inside the urban growth boundary, you need higher density. You have to have minimum of R4 density. We countered that, and here we were arguing with environmental organization that we want lower density than they want. Their argument was you're inside the urban growth boundary, you need to have urban uses. And this is an example of what happens. We're trying to apply environmental conditions that I think better relate to the rural area, are more effective in protecting the environment in the rural area. We're applying that to urban areas, and our code is not flexible enough to allow for conditions. Actually, the quote from our code which said buffers may be reduced when buffer reduction impacts are mitigated. As Cameron pointed out, there's a whole lot more to that code which specifically allows how much reduction you can do. In this case, the applicant is asking for basically taking 100% constrained property and mitigating the effects of putting a 11,000 square foot building in it. And I didn't understand how the stormwater was going to be treated, or how you're going to put a truck parking lane in the right-of-way. So it's very disappointing, but I can see that the handwriting's on the wall that this isn't going to pass.
Call the question?
No.
Oh,
Councilmember Vance.
I would agree with Councilmember Jarrett, and I think Councilmember Curley and Witten. All of you would love to see the Ace Hardware continue. Unfortunately, I don't know that I've ever had a situation here where unilaterally the advice we're given by our council and by staff in terms of policy is united, and 100%. This is bad precedence. I think it's bad policy. It creates liability. It's I think we have procedures to look at our environmental codes. We're following those procedures. We'll be looking at the ECA this year. We can't simply throw things into the air because of one situation. I think the Councilmember Ramirez reference to favoritism, I think, plays here. There are a number of other issues, and we've gone over most of them tonight, and so I'm certainly going to support Ramirez's motion.
Okay, thank you. My turn, I guess. We've certainly, I think, explored every corner, every possibility to help ACE relocate. I know the Economic Development Committee has been active in trying to find a solution. The city has been very active in trying to find a solution. One of the things that was not mentioned is that when the city first heard about ACE's situation, the city manager went to Regency. And even though Regency had a contractor, was about to sign a contract, I'm not sure which, with another tenant, Ben was able to talk Regency and the other tenant into giving ACE a year's extension. Well, we are now at the point where we're halfway through that year's extension, and we still don't have a solution. Unfortunately, the solution that emerged very late in the game was one that was encumbered by a lot of issues. Environmental issues like we're looking at here are something we can't arbitrarily overcome. And I completely agree that if we were to do anything for ACE here in respect to putting aside our code, we would be creating a very dangerous precedent for others to walk in the door and ask for the same treatment. And we're also, to echo Councilmember Valderrama, exposing the city and our taxpayers to the potential of significant legal liability. And frankly, it might apply to the council members personally. I cannot support this project. I will be voting in favor of the motion as read. So with that, I'd like to ask if anyone wants to say anything further. Otherwise, I will ask the deputy mayor to call the question.
Call the question.
All in favor of the motion to deny the Kinder Ace docket proposal and all subsequent amendments proposed by the applicant team, and discontinue further work on the proposal, and to direct the city manager to continue work with Ace Hardware to explore options to relocate elsewhere in Sammamish, so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. By our vote of 7-0, the motion carries. The application is denied. Okay, we are at 11:10. I'm going to ask the indulgence of the council to move very quickly into the voting.
Maybe we can have all three commission forms and then have council members all fill them out.
Yeah, you have 3 different ballots in front of you, and you have 3 copies of each ballot in case you can't decide on the first. So if you just want to go ahead and fill out all 3 ballots.
Are you going to collect them?
Do you want to collect them in a certain order? First, the planning commission?
Sure, yeah, let's do the planning.
Planning first?
Oh, we can do whichever way we want.
Well, Arts is on top.
Let's do the Arts Commission, and then the Parks, and then the planning.
Okay, so
Always makes more sense.
You can sort
putting
them
up
out.
parts first,
Sure does.
read them and weep.
Arts.
Legislature Arts?
You want me to read them?
Oh, is it in that?
I heard that.
Good luck.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate that.
We're almost there with 1 so far. Boom, boom. 1's already elected.
Okay, go ahead.
How can Ann Schaefer has
gotta
4 and not
say.
14?
Land, Schaefer.
2 elected. 1 more to go. James will decide. Well, that's how we got our 3. This is
So,
done.
Harrison, Lang.
And Schaefer should have 7 votes. Melanie?
All right,
2, 4, 6, 7.
You have to move the cursor.
And Schaefer is wrong, the number total.
Now, we need to make a quick motion on this one.
There you go. All right. Which one are we doing now? The
I got them both.
We're not doing Parks and Rec.
Parks and Recs now?
Yeah, Dan them both.
For a while, there was 13. Better go home.
Let's hope we can get rid of these all on the first ballot. Oh, Lorraine's coming out strong. Pauline.
You can park in the neighborhood, and walk a couple blocks.
All right.
Well, not bad. Look at the drive. Yeah. If you're, from the direction you're coming in, you go past it, and about a block, you're in a residential area, just any place in the street. Well, I use that ferry a lot, and it's not a problem. What time?
All right, they have been selected.
I'll meet you. Barry?
Okay, so we have a selection on Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec's done.
Let's now do planning.
Carpool. We're gonna carpool with 2.
Okay.
Print it out someplace.
They have an interest in
Same?
Cameron, did that goatee come in sometime this evening?
Bad code.
That's done already.
Oh, you did.
11? No, that'll throw the curve.
Depends on what time we leave here. I may be
Okay,
just
so
going
that's
straight from home.
Soto.
Yeah.
Bruce, why don't you go home, man? There's nothing else for you to do. So I guess no
Okay, done.
Exactly.
Well, we're done, but now you have to pass your resolutions. So if you want to start with the Arts Commission,
Mr. Deputy Mayor, if you please make motions as appropriate for each commission.
I move to appoint the 3 members to the Sammamish Arts Commission that received the most votes.
so that's Lynn Garrettson, Amy Lamb, and Ann Schaefer.
As stated by the clerk.
And I'm assuming that Lynn Garrettson will be reappointed to position 1,
That's correct.
and Ann Schaefer to position 2, and Amy Lamb to position 4, which is the 2-year term.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to appoint, can you give me those names again?
Lynn Garrettson,
Lynn Garrettson,
Ann Schaefer.
Ann Schaefer.
Amy Lamb.
and
Amy Lamb.
Amy Lamb to the Sammamish Arts Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. By a vote of 7-0, they are appointed.
In the Park and Rec Commission, it's Pauline Cantor, Lorene Leo, and Cheryl Wagner.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we appoint the 3 members stated to the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we appoint Pauline Cantor,
Lorene Leo,
Lorraine Leo, and
Cheryl Wagner.
Cheryl Wagner to the Sammamish Parks Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Planning
Aye.
Commission appointments are
7-0.
Philip. Oh, I'm
Are
sorry.
those all the same length?
Yes, they're all the same length terms. And the Planning Commission appointments are Philip Churian and Manuel Soto.
You've got to say which term, though.
Yeah, well, that's, so one term is a 4-year term and one is a 1-year term?
Okay, we'd be appointing under the rules, Philip Churian to the 4-year term and Manuel Soto to the 1-year term. Yeah, because of the number of votes cast.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we appoint Philip Cherian and Manuel Soto as members of the Sammamish Planning Commission.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to appoint Philip Churian and Manuel Soto as members of the Planning Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it possible for the record to make a comment that those that weren't selected, that we encourage them to attend those meetings and volunteer, and hopefully they'll participate again in a future commission application?
I certainly think that's appropriate, John. First of all, I want to thank everyone who applied for the fact that they raised their hand and were willing to step forward. And I know this process took some personal time on their part, and I want to express the council's appreciation for that. And for those who won, congratulations. For those who were not selected, I encourage you to stay involved and to come back to us in the future, either for this or for another position. There are many volunteer opportunities around the city, which may give you a different insight into things. and I do encourage you to partake in them. So again, on behalf of the council and myself, thank you very much for applying.
We do have one resolution left, which is the extension of Kathy Richardson's term on the Planning Commission.
And this is a simple one. I can make a quick staff report. Kathy Richardson has been a valuable member of the commission. She has served as the chair of that commission. We're in the middle of the environmental critical areas ordinance. I think it's imperative that we keep the commission intact, so we're seeking council authorization to extend the Commissioner Richardson term till the March 31st, 2013.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on it?
Yeah, we've done this in the past. I know, I forgot, I think it was the town center plan, I believe.
Yes.
All the question?
Nancy's got 1 foot out the door.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. By a vote of 7-0, that motion carries. Don, did you want to bring up this thing from,
Given time, can it wait?
Well, actually, do you have it with you? I don't know where it is.
I have it with me.
Have a what?
Here's a document.
It's a surprise.
There's one final surprise document.
Well, this is, was from the city of Seattle. There's, it has to do with the regional transportation lobbying effort, and we went over what the proposal was from the local mayors, and that was to increase the gas tax by 8 cents per gallon, allow a motor vehicle excise tax option up to 1.5%, and expand the vehicle license fee from $20 to $40. And this is what a bunch of mayors have signed, and going down to Olympia. And this, Seattle's asking more mayors to sign on the letter. And so the question is, does our council want to give our mayor authority to sign on that letter?
just by way of information, I got this at
Can I see that?
today, and shot it out to everyone this afternoon once I finally read it. And it's a short fuse item because of some deadlines they're trying to make. The fact is, the transportation budget for the state is in extremely sad shape, and we are going to have to find revenue to build roads somehow, somewhere. And this is the best proposal that's come out of a number of discussions. And Don, you might want to elaborate on that, because I know ETP has been in on these and this.
Well, Sound Cities Association has worked with the various mayors and the county executive, and that's what they came up with. ETP wasn't totally enamored with it, actually.
The car tab thing, I think, is a death
Exactly,
knell
that's-
below. I'm not for this. I'm for the gas tax, quite frankly, but apparently the gas tax can't be used for transportation.
Can't
Transit.
Transit.
Yeah, excuse me. So I wouldn't be for signing on this.
Me either.
How about the rest of you?
No. Shaking his head.
Okay, I guess you don't
Unless it's a
have
vote of the
quorum.
people.
I'm all right with the gas tax. It hasn't been raised in a very long time, but the others stuff doesn't apply.
So I'm not hearing any interest at all.
Nope.
My sign is, so I won't. Okay. I'm going to can council reports for tonight.
Thank you.
I reserved for the next time it is back on the agenda.
Okay.
My kids said, how late's the meeting ago? They said midnight, and I think they think I was kidding.
Having can council reports, is there anything anyone absolutely has to bring up?
We have a public safety meeting on Friday. I think we've got 2 council members coming, and you're all invited.
All the people out here?
Okay?
Or the viewers.
And we will represent Romero.
Okay, please. Folks, I still need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 11:22 PM.
Good job.